Baby, call me when you get up and get out and get off. And I hit you when I get down and get in and get on. Just call me when you get up and get out and get off. And I hit you when I get down and get in and get on. Just call me when you get up and get out and get off. And I hit you when I get down and get in and get on. Baby, you could just call me when you get up and get out and get off. And I hit you when I get down and get in and get on. Ayy, look, pulling up in your driveway, treat it like it's my drive-thru. Hit me up when you find time, find a way to come find you. Come to find I can't live without you. Maybe could, but where the fun in that? She don't worry about where I'm going, she just know that I'm coming back. She throw it back like back to back, flipping over like acrobat. Kicking game, that's hacky sack. We still kick it right after that. No shit catching my hands right. Picture at me, I really did. Playing all of my heartstrings, and I swore I wasn't gon' feel again. Just be coming when you get up and get out and get off. And I hit you when I get down and get in and get on. Just call me when you get up and get out and get off.
Welcome back. Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing? Yes, I did hear everyone in the chat. You know, listen, we try to create a mood here, okay? We try to create some vibes. We like a little chill beats. So, how is everyone doing? Hopefully, you're doing well. Yes, normally we play the lo-fi beats, but today, you know, I thought I'd change it up. I put on a little hip hop, a little R&B. And then we switched over to the fantasy and cinematic route. And yeah, and we'll probably go back here in a second because it's very distracting. So, anyways, welcome to this Tuesday, April 12th live stream. And we are we're in the process of winding these streams down. And what do I mean by that? Well, these Tuesday live streams have been a lot of fun for us, but Thursday was always my day to live stream. Tuesday was our day to play. And we are in the process of getting that next live stream game going. So, yeah, we're probably only going to have a couple more of these. And, yeah. New AP coming. Yes, Weasel Lord. Yes, we do have the new AP coming. Let me see. I'm probably going to create like some sort of official trailer. And we'll go for there. But yeah. Yeah. Until the next TPK anyway. So, you know, we could talk about that. If people want to ask questions. But let me do some introductions. My name is Derek Melinda from the Knights of Last Call, and this is our GM Q&A live stream. And what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, it means a couple of things. It means, number one, we're here to answer your questions. We're here to help you if we can. The chat, they're very, very helpful. Most of them, patrons. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Great to see you. We've got, I know I saw Ben in there. We got Caldaria Q, who is a brand new patron. Welcome, Caldaria Q. But we also have Bill. Bill's in there. Great. Bill, another wonderful, excellent component of our Patreon. We got Weasel Lord, Alex. There's Kieran, a.k.a. KC Robbins. He's in here. Josh Foley. Who else we got in here? Bonnet on Alloy. Weasel Lord Gabriel. And, yeah. Hey, Weasel Lord's a patron, too. Hey, Brutus the Cat is here, too. Hey, welcome, everyone. Yes, the haircut. Yeah, so I went in there, and she asked me if how do I get it on, you know, the back, and I said, oh, I get it like a 1/4 inch, and she put it on her clippers, and I just like it tight around the bottom and the sides, like around the ears, and she just promptly went just like right up the side. I think she thought I was like some cool young person who like gets it real high up the sides and has like the hard part or something, and I explained to her that was in fact not the way I was, and to do her best to fix it. But it's hair; it'll grow back, and it's at least it's more manageable. That's for sure. But once again, our dreams of Matt Mercer-fying myself have been dashed on the rocks. Anyways, yeah. So welcome. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat like this. Put a big question in uppercase letters with a colon. If you do that, it shows up as a big thick yellow bar in my chat log, so it's easier for me to find it. So eventually I'll probably put something in the instructions for that, but that makes it easier for me to find it. But if you are interested in supporting the channel and supporting the stream, I advise you to tip. You can use the YouTube Super Chat option, but you could also use the Streamlabs tip option. There's a link below, or you could type !tip in the chat to get the explanations from the bot. We prefer Streamlab tips just because we get a higher percentage of that, but and that'll also make the little bar go up. And yeah, what is the bar? Well, the bar, and it's higher than usual. This is a longer term goal. As I kind of alluded to at the beginning of the stream, we are working on a new AP, and we don't like to half-ass things around here. So along with that means new art assets. We are going to go out and we are going to look into making getting some new art made for our new characters, our new game, our new adventure, and I think it'll be really, really fun. It'll be really, really cool, and we appreciate the support as we get this new AP off the ground. I was about to answer my own question. I was like, wait, who has a question? Oh, I have a question. So yeah, and if you're really interested in being a part of this community, check out the link below, or it's also on our YouTube homepage, which is to our Patreon. And Patreon is the best way to support the channel. We have a couple different tiers with a lot of different options available, and we have some really, really cool stuff going on here. And
GM Scott tipped $25. Okay, I'm here. Bring on DW, BW, TB, and more.
Hey, thank you, GMs. Thank you, GM Scott.
Bennett tipped $25. Question: with all of the Dungeon World talk and its growing popularity on the Discord, how long until you hate it? D. Jason B tipped $10. Never half.
Thank you, everybody.
Anything.
Thank you.
!in chat as many things as possible.
So first, let me say thank you, GM Scott. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Jason B. Appreciate all of you. GM Scott, yeah, I've got... Well, for starters, GM Scott, I've got Torchbearer first edition right here, but... I also have this bad boy. And you can see here on the top, the burning wheel symbol. This is Fragile, and this is my Torchbearer second edition, which I have not opened yet. We may be we're probably going to do an unboxing of it or something. And of course, for those of you who are unaware, there was a Torchbearer second edition release. It was a Kickstarter, and then of course there were some people who missed the Kickstarter, which included myself because it was the middle of the pandemic, and there ended up being a Torchbearer second edition complete box set up on eBay, and I tried to buy it, and there were a bunch of people outbidding me, and then at the last minute I got sniped. Well, it turns out that the people who were bidding on this thing were all people from our Patreon, and then a patron ended up winning it all, who ended up outbidding everybody else at the last minute very sneakily and very cheekily, and well, I lost, so I had to go buy it retail from the store and pay the full price, and and pay the shipping costs. So, but it's finally arrived. So that's that. So yeah, very excited about that. So Ben's question was, with all the talk of Dungeon World on the server, how long until I hate it? Well, never. I mean, because I'll say this, enjoying Dungeon World is a gateway into enjoying Powered by the Apocalypse games. And there is such a wide range of Powered by the Apocalypse games. And not to poo-poo on Dungeon World, I think it's a fantastic game, but it is a old edition of Powered by the Apocalypse. And there are newer games, such as, I talked about Monster Hearts 2nd Edition, Monster of the Week, Thirsty Sword Lesbians. There's a lot of games out there that have sort of, continue to elevate the tech. One of the things that I really appreciate about the Powered by the Apocalypse engine and the indie game movement in general is that they, as a community, whether it's a organized group or as a group of individuals, are continually pushing and elevating their thing. They're not trying to go backwards, right? They're trying to go forwards. And, something that I, one of the reasons I've critiqued D&D 5th edition is because in many ways I felt like it was a step backwards. It was a return to earlier, more traditional tropes, which is fine. Obviously, it worked out really well for them. Yeah. I have so many games up here. Oh, there it is. Yeah, Caldaria Q, we have that one too. That's another one I have. Another good one. And this is this represents a newer version. It's not that super new. I think it's like 2015. 2015. Wow, I got it exactly right. But still, in Dungeon World came out 2012 or so, 2011. And so, it's 10 years old and they've done a lot of stuff with the game engine since then. And so I think that the more people get into Dungeon World, the more that they are going to be able to look at a game like Monster Hearts or Monster of the Week or Night Witches or any of the other Powered by the Apocalypse games and say, I get this core engine. Let me experiment. How do I bring this element in? How do I bring that element in? And I think that can only be described as a good thing. And, yeah. No, Thirsty Sword Lesbian does not have dwarvens and clerics in it. And then again, that's what makes Dungeon World so great, is it is getting to play with these, and if my biggest complaint is also my biggest compliment to Dungeon World, which is it is very much a Powered by the Apocalypse game with very heavy, tips of the hat nods to Dungeons and Dragons and to some of those tropes and to some of those mechanics that we associate with, fantasy adventure play. And I think it does a really good job of sort of putting one leg in each of those two worlds. So, yeah. So thank you, gentlemen, for those tips. And, I'm excited, Ben. I think Dungeon World is a game engine like Blades in the Dark that really speaks to a certain style of my GMing play. A lot of times I would say that my GMing style lives in one of two ways. I either like a very strong mechanical game that is played sort of like a board game, but with, thematic elements to it and being a little bit more, not just playing a board game just to win, but, making a mind towards flavoring, my actions. But the other side of the coin is I love games that are extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? Immersive and extremely simple, and that the game mechanics actually serve to push the story forward. So not just game mechanics that resolve yes or no or success conditions, but game mechanics that actually purposely introduce new narrative complications and challenges into the game. And that's what Dungeon World does so well. So I don't know. And I think there's a lot of people who could really benefit from learning the principles and the agendas and the moves of Dungeon World and applying them to their D&D 5e game and to their Pathfinder 2nd Edition game, because I think it makes you a better GM. And, one of the things, if anything, though, I will say this, I'm really excited. I know that there was a Dungeon World game on our Patreon a couple nights ago, I think Friday night, maybe, which is really exciting. Love to see it. Because again, our Patreon, we have a Discord, we have a fully maxed out server, and people are welcome to play. We have all sorts of community games that get set up. Yeah, chewy mechanics, not crunchy. That's a good way to describe it. I like it. I do like mechanics. There's only a small handful of games that I like that are very low on mechanics. Dread is one of those. That's the horror RPG game that you play with the Jenga tower. That's one of the few examples. And that's a game that I'll bust out maybe once a year, twice a year, tops. And it's always a one shot, and it's always a one and done. It's always a very specific type of game. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, that's, I prefer mechanics. Even in a narrative game, I prefer mechanics because, I'm not a writer. I don't pretend to be one. I'm not I like it that the dice, change things up and push me in interesting directions. It's one of the reasons why I really have pushed things like the Tome of Adventure Design, which I think is in its last day of Kickstarter. So if you missed Tome of Adventure Design and you didn't want to buy it through the Amazon affiliate link, well, we apparently were so popular it made them launch a Kickstarter. I'm sure the two things were completely coincidental, but I'm excited for things like that because I like randomness. I think it spurs creativity. I think it doesn't harm creativity. I think it spurs it, and I think that can only be a good thing. 6 days left, Brutus. Thank you. Well, 6 days left. Tome of Adventure Time. They're doing really, really great. So let me see here. Joshua Foley asks, question, if we're talking about RPG systems, I was wondering about your thoughts on Ben Robbins' Microscope. All right, what are we talking about here? We're talking about Ben Robbins. We're talking about Microscope and the equally as good Microscope Explorer. And these are games in and of themselves, which are very, very, I mean, it says here that it is a fractal role-playing game of epic histories. I don't know that I would describe it as a role-playing game. But what this game does is very interesting. What this game does is it lets you and a group of friends create the shared history of a world. It could be an epic 10,000-year dynasty. It could be 1 year in the heart of a war. But what it basically says is you go around in a circle, and on your turn, you basically get to create an event in this timeline. And you can make it's completely non-linear, and you have complete autonomy. So I could say, hey, the dwarves found a new city on the edge of the river in order to trade with the humans. And someone else on the very next turn could go forward in time 200 years and say, the dwarven city is destroyed in a tremendous, explosion or war. There's no constraint, right? You can build however you want. And we have done this. We have used this collaboratively for storytelling purposes. And I could see that William Brandis is in the chat, and he says I should screen share the Trello board. Let me log in. I logged out of everything because I thought that might help with my YouTube problem. Apparently YouTube was down all day or is having problems all day or something like that. All right, let me go in here. I'm going to share something. Okay. All right, everybody can see? Great. All right, so this was a campaign Microscope that me and some of the members who you would know now as the Knights of Last Call put together. And the way that Microscope works is, we started off with, this was the idea of my group, okay, of PCs building a world together, right? And they were going to be players in this world. But again, I trusted them to this. In my ways, this is just them becoming invested, right? This has become them becoming invested into the game. I don't care that they know some of the secrets of my world. That's great. Their character is supposed to live in this world. I want them to know how the world works. And by participating in this process, this history of the world is just as much theirs as it is ours. It's also a great way for characters, or I should say for players, to interject the elements that they want to see in their game into the game. And, you know, sometimes that can be as simple or as, you know, as basic as creating an event because you want to see it. Maybe it's something from your favorite novel or your favorite TV show, and you think it'd be cool to be in the game. You have this authority and this autonomy to create it. It's also a good safety exercise, not just in terms of like, you know, what is and isn't allowed, but like making sure that everybody is going to see something or not see something that they don't want to do. So let's talk about how this would happen. So I would get together with my players. In this case, we'll use Trello, which is sort of a Kanban board system. But you could, the game suggests doing this in person with note cards. But, you know, we did it online. And we basically start off here with this main concept, okay? Like what is, you know, we wanted something really epic, right? And so we have this, you know, very generic, very high level, very epic concept. In the twilight years of the universe, the song of dark and light begins its final verse. What were we going here for here? We were going for very much like an old school order versus chaos, you know, the dark one versus, you know, the bringers of the light in a final cataclysmic sort of battle to see who could prevail. So that was sort of the theme of our campaign. But, you know, you could set that theme however you want it to be. Honestly. And so that's I think where we could, you know, you could have fun with that. I'm trying to resize this here. There we go. That's better. So then the next thing that we do is we create what are called the palettes. All right. And a palette is simply players saying, these are things, these are elements that I want to see. We don't even necessarily have to go back and forth in this. This is just us talking before we begin the game, right? It's us saying, these are the things, these are the elements of the game that I want to be important. By the way, I should note, I think this took us like, you know, 2 or 3 sessions to build this. We even sort of did it offline and sort of just kind of went back and forth. So you can see here that these are all the things that as a group, we thought we wanted to be included in our game. Sometimes they were narrative items, like Tim wanted trolls to be in the game. Okay, so he said, yes, I want to see trolls. Someone wanted to see caravans or trading expeditions, followers, henchmen, troops, ancient ruins, but also some of it is more thematic. Like we wanted abstract or descriptive combat, not, you know, grid-based combat. We wanted, you know, large numbers of enemies, you know, a few against many. We didn't want to just kind of do your traditional, you know, group of PCs versus 2 or 3 bad guys, right? So we said, what do we want to see in the game? And then we said, what do we not want to see in the game? This was our no palette. We didn't want easy teleportation magic. We didn't want a complex inventory system. At this point, by the way, we hadn't really decided what system we were even using for this campaign, because, you know, we thought, well, we'll build the palette out, we'll build the world out, and then we'll see what system, because we know so many of them and there are so many out there, what system, you know, fits this best. You know, when you see something like, okay, I want to see death spirals, okay, I want to see, you know, abstract combat. Well, something like Pathfinder 2 is not really the choice there because, you know, those things are not really present in Pathfinder 2. This suggests something a little bit more old world. GM Scott says, you wanted death spirals? Yes. We wanted consequences that would impact your character's ability and make it harder for them to survive and, you know, make sure that, you know, again, this was supposed to be maybe a little bit more of a gritty world, a little bit of a tougher world. And again, we talked about this sword and sorcery feel. So, you know, we talked about what we didn't want in the game. And so once we're all agreed that, okay, this is what we have, this is what we're going with, then I create this initial phase. And what we have here in the game, you have these high level elements of your story, which I believe the game calls, someone else can check, you know, correct me on this. They're called periods, maybe. Yeah, periods. So these are like, you know, huge parts of your game, you know, big eons of history. You know, they could be hundreds of years, they could be thousands of years. But the point is, this is sort of an age or an epoch of your time. And then players can go in and they can add events that were critical moments in those time periods. Okay, periods, events, and scenes. And so I'll talk about scenes in a second, Josh, because I want to talk about this. Because when we played this, we actually played this kind of almost play by post, right? We didn't actually sit around a table or even on a Zoom call and do this. Now, in the game, the reason why it calls this a fractal role-playing game is, as Josh was alluding to here, you go around the table and you create these periods, okay? And then you create these critical events that occur within those periods. And then you get to, so you can see here, like, this is an event, right? A source of power beyond even that of magic is discovered. And, this was created by Mr. Aaron. And you can see here that he is basically taking Wheel of Time and interjecting it into our game, because the powers that be, drilled outside of reality in order to find new magical power. And then in the game, the way it suggests is the third event, which are scenes, are supposed to be even more. Again, the game is called Microscope because the idea is you start way out here and you're drilling in. So we start with these huge periods that could last hundreds of years, drilling down, zooming in, if you will, into a specific event. And then within that event, drilling into a specific scene. And in the game, the scene is something that you are supposed to role play. Now, you don't have a character, so you might say, okay, who's in this scene? Okay, well, what is this scene? Okay, the event is the siege of the great city of New Karam, and the scene is when, the opposing general demands an audience with the king of the city, and he's going to ask him to surrender and spare the lives of his people. And I want to see that scene acted out. So for this scene, how about I'll be the king and you'll be the general, and you could be, the high mage who is sort of secretly behind the power behind the throne, and we'll kind of just role play this out, basically improv acting. If you want to do that, if that's what you really are excited about, I think that's fine. But we took a different approach with this. What we did with scenes is we instead created them, because again, in Microscope, you have complete autonomy on my turn. So like, for example, here, we were talking about this city empire called Castul. Well, I came in here and I created this event called the Destruction of Castul. And I said, the War of Dragons ends with the destruction of the city-state of Castul. I get to just come in and say, nope, the city's destroyed. That's my goal. I mean, like, I can do whatever I want. No one can stop me or say anything otherwise. So what we wanted to do, though, because we were playing this sort of by post and kind of taking turns and logging into the board and adding things, and we might add two or three things per day as we sort of went around, but we do it remotely. Is we used scenes as a way to sort of poll or survey the other audience members, okay, or the other members of the Microscope game. So, for example, and we encourage people to, put a little bit of what's the word I want to say? A little bit of flavor, a little bit of history, a little bit of personality into some of these. So, for example, in our game, we have this idea was that dragons were sort of these primitive beasts, and this person named Beliad sort of learned the spells that would enable them to be controlled, and he became a dragon master. And through magic, the dragon sort of became more intelligent, less bestial, more intelligent. And so we wanted to, I had, Aaron had this question, which was, after an age, is the nature of the dragon beast or noble? In other words, are the dragons now actually civilized beings, or are they just, nothing more than beasts? And, he puts out this prompt here. He says, a formal debate in the High Council in the Chamber of Stars began after hundreds of years of dragon domination. Is their nature now one of truly sentient creatures, deserving of freedoms, or is it only through the magic of domination, through the eras, that have allowed them to think or speak? So he puts this out here, and then the other players all sort of chime in, including Aaron, right? And so the idea is you're sort of, making a little brief statement here, a sort of a vote, because it's basically a player saying, I want to see what the other what the other players in this game want to do with this in our story. And it's like a temperature check. One of the things that Microscope encourages you to do is to not do temperature checks. Once the game gets started, the palette at the beginning of the game, that's for temperature checking. But once you get started with the game, the idea is don't give into groupthink, and don't let, other people's opinions or thoughts sway you. You don't want someone persuasive who talks a lot to sort of dominate the game. That's not the point of it. When it's your turn, do what you want. This was a way for us to say, well, you know what? I like my friends and I want to see what they think. And ultimately, I get the final say. And so you can see here that, Aaron wrote up this little thing here that, Chancellor Mador of the Seventh Star and the Guardian of the Tower of Telath. None of that, by the way, was basically anything that existed in the game. You can just kind of type up whatever you want, and apparently now it exists. So apparently we have something called the Guardian of the Tower of Telath. What is that? I don't know. If someone wanted to expand on that, they could. If someone wanted to ignore it, they didn't have to. Proposes to the High Council and his peers that though dragons were once beasts, through years of magical endowment and breeding, they have become awakened. Do they not enjoy the fruits of the mind, and should they not be free to choose their own path? Or does the council fear what may happen when their slave force can no longer choose their own way? So Aaron was basically saying, yeah, I think dragons, they are, real people, and they should be given freedom. And then another player came in here with apparently with some name redacted from the Imperial log. Next, you will say we shall add a dog to the council as well. Ridiculous. And then, I chimed in here with General Aldine, commander of the East and the Fourth Star, rises and angrily voices, I remember well the destruction wrought by a red that had broken free of our domination during the siege of Baal. Intelligent? Yes, but possessed of an insidious and cunning mind. The magic of domination has given them a will to dominate and destroy stronger than any man. And then finally, after kind of reviewing all those, Aaron sort of, summarized it and said, basically, the debate was, there was a debate in the council. Should dragons be freed and allowed to live their own lives, or should dragons remain under the domination of the mages? And that was the proposal. And then we all sort of weighed in, representing different characters that we either are drawing from previously established events or just making up out of whole cloth. And Aaron said, and thus the council ruled that dragons were not to be freed, but kept under tight leash and key. Some resisted this ruling, even going so far as to attempt and free dominated dragons. The results were horrifying. Raging dragons brought down violence unseen in hundreds of years upon the races of men. Death and destruction once more entered the world. Yada, yada, yada. So this was a pivotal event. In sort of a scene, if you will, in the course of our story, and that is how we proceeded from there. Now that event, this discovery of magic, this age of legends. By the way, having just read this to you, you can see that the next period was known as the War of Dragons. So obviously that did not, that may have been a precipitating event. But when we started this game, this War of Dragons period didn't even exist. In fact, it's possible that someone created the War of Dragons era, first, and then goes back and says,
Jason B. tip $10. I don't get it. Where are the vomiting and recall knowledge checks?
Right, no recall knowledge checks. This is literally just a game about creating a game. But again, I want you to understand that there's maybe two ways that you could have gotten to this point. Someone could have come in and said, I think a War of Dragons would be cool. And they added this War of Dragons period in the future. And Aaron went in and said, hey, I wonder, how did we get, we know it's been established, there is a War of Dragons. How did we get to that point? I'm wondering. So let me go back, again, completely non-linear time travel here. You're in your fourth dimensional beings here who can travel easily. Let's go back into the previous age and let's create something about how did this come to pass? But alternatively, we could have been here and someone, Aaron created this and said, oh yeah, there was a big debate and they ruled that dragons are actually to be, enslaved, but people freed them anyways, and they were really pissed off, and they started raging, and then someone goes, oh, okay, so we're definitely going to have a War of Dragons, and then they may have added the War of Dragons afterwards. How we got there, it could have been either way, and to be honest with you, I don't actually remember how we actually got there. But, we had a War of Dragons, and then you can see here that there was this period here. Someone created this, the Wars of Independence. aka the Demi-Human Rebellions. And you know what? We never went further with that. It just sort of, that was an era that we didn't want to explore, or that the game ended before we had a chance to explore it. And that's okay. Maybe in our history, that's an era that isn't well known. Not only to the players, but to the GM as well. And so even as you go further into your game, you might bring something up from the Wars of Independence, and the players might be legitimately like, oh yeah, no one really knows a whole lot about that era of history because so few records were kept. And maybe the GM gives a little bit, now that you're, once the Microscope game is complete, now you can put back on your GM hat and now you're in charge. But, you might choose to introduce something into that element, and the players are like, I know what this is in context, even if I don't know what it is in detail. And so then we proceeded on through, a period of time, the Sundering, the Scepter of Dawn disappearing, the Long Dark, the Return, the Unification Wars, Pax Costolian, the Fall of Costolian, and that is sort of where the game ends, right here. And as we went through the game, we also kind of kept this list, this sort of running total, if you will, of these, we called them true names, but these were basically important people from history or important places, basically important nouns throughout history. And like, if you were going to play in this game, these are words or terms that probably most people should know. Like, if you live in this world and you're a part of this world, you would know what a Knight of Flame was, and you would know what a Knight of Shadow was. And normally when you start an RPG game, your players don't know anything about your world, unless they've, thumbed through the history manual or, campaign book. But in this case, this is a world that we all collaboratively built together. In fact, the player may have been the person who created the Knight of Flame or the Knights of Shadow. And so they do know what that is because, they made it. And so, yes, it gives the players maybe more information than they would otherwise know, but it could be a very powerful tool for making sure we're all on the same page, that we all, your players start the game with they basically start the game with as much knowledge as you do about what is your world and how to use it. And it makes them feel more like legitimate citizens of this world because they are going to have this historical basis for the history of your world. And yes, they may know some things that were lost to time, and technically no one should know, let alone some, low-level adventurer. But just because the player knows it doesn't mean the PC needs to know it. And more importantly, it could also be a great way for the player to sort of nudge, wink, wink, and sort of push their character in an interesting direction, because the player knows that is an interesting direction, even if their PC doesn't know. So again, I think it's an incredible system, and I encourage its use, and I know that there are people within our Discord who do the same thing. So that was a very long answer to your question. So hopefully you appreciate that. But that's okay. I think we have a very light crew today. Let me take a look. Yeah, we're only like 30, 35 people. So thank you all for being here. That's awesome. It's incredible. But again, we're talking systems. But if you do have a question, remember, big capital letters, and type it out like this with a colon. And that way it'll show up big and yellow, and I'll be able to see it easily. And of course, if you tip or super chat, I'll try to get to you right away. Damien with a super chat. Thank you, buddy. Okay, can you start over? I'm a little bit late. There wasn't too much there, Damien. What we did talk about is that there is a new AP coming. So I think somebody asked a question about that. So I'm going to come back here and kind of come up here. New art, Ed. Does that mean the PCs have already been created? Any previews? No, the PCs have not been created yet. In fact, we are going to do a session 0, and I am encouraging the players to come with ideas, but not with anything hard written. I want that process of the group sort of going back and forth, talking about characters, talking about ideas, to be something that we do live. So the art budget is more for us making sure we get an artist whose style we like lined up. And then once we actually have the characters made, then we can engage with them and say, hey, can you make us some character art? That'd be really fun. Again, one of the things that's nice about having a YouTube channel with an incredible patron like we have is that we can take that money. Normally I'm like, hey, I think getting art is silly because what if the characters die? Like what happened in Rise of the Rune Lords. But if we spend a couple $100 on character art and we play for 5 or 6 sessions, and everybody ends up dying or something, or even just one character dies and makes it a new character and we have to get new art, that's the price of doing business. But that is the freedom. That is what these tips and that's what these patrons allow us to do, is to invest more into our game than I would otherwise ever invest, because it would be a little bit foolish and a little bit dangerous. So no previews yet. But what I can share, this isn't really news to anybody who's a member of our Patreon, but we are going to be running Quest for the Frozen Flame, the most recent AP from Paizo. It's a level 1 to 10 set in the realm of the Mammoth Lords. And we're pretty excited about that. Let's see. What surprised me most about the Patreon survey? Well, not exactly a GMQA question, Kieran, but I would say that the two things that took me the most surprise were, one was there was a larger than percentage of patrons than I thought who said that the actual play was important to them, or very important to them. So that surprised me, especially that considering that we play, before we played in here.
Anonymous tipped $130.
Whoa, Anonymous! Holy shit! Well, thanks. That's amazing. That's incredible. Thank you very much. And just like that, my multi-week goal is reached, because you guys are crazy and you guys are awesome, and the fine folks and the fine ladies and gentlemen of this community love supporting us, and just got to say thank you. It's very, very, very generous. It's been a while since we had a $100 plus, and Anonymous, whoever you are, thank you very much. I appreciate the support. I know this channel appreciates the support, and that is very kind of you and very supportive of you, and yeah, thank you. Stretch goal. I need some more blow. Actually, full disclosure, we are probably going to start. I mean, I don't want to, it's penciled in, okay, because I haven't officially announced it yet, so I don't want anybody to hang me if I say this. I throw away Anonymous is a great name, and I do love it. I read it as Anonymous, and then I was like, oh no, it's Anonymous. So Anonymous, you know what? Anonymous for you. Horizon Thundersphere. That's an HTS for Anonymous. I would play my IRT, my Inner Radiance Torrent, but then we would get copyright blocked. I need to do another one because we got copyright struck, because when I did my Inner Radiance Torrent, I had some non-copyright DRM free music playing. Thank you, Anonymous. Where are we going with this? So we are tentatively scheduled to do our session 0 the first week of May. Why the first week of May? That would be May 3rd. Because in the days before COVID, in the days before I was basically unemployed and trying to start my own business and failing, my mom and I used to go on a cruise every year around Mother's Day. It was my gift to her. I'd buy the cruise. We'd go cruising. It's a great way for me to spend some time with my mom, and at the same time, not go crazy, because you're on the cruise ship, you're together, but you can also kind of do your own thing, and I don't have to worry about my mom. So obviously we stopped doing that for the last couple years because of COVID, and even the year before that because of my financial situation. And so I am in a situation where I can now go on them. And so the last week of April, my mom and I are going on a cruise, our Caribbean cruise, our annual Caribbean cruise. And so I will be out that week. And so that is why we are postponing starting the new AP until the first week of May. That way we don't, start and then immediately have a break or an error. So we're going to start May, probably May 3rd. We'll do a session 0. We'll do it live, and we'll put in some cool character building stuff. It's going to be PF2, right? So we're talking mechanics, we're talking things, but we're going to talk about personalities and character backgrounds, and I want to make sure that the characters all mesh together well. I think it'll be really fun. But it's still Pathfinder 2, right? There's still monsters to be beaten, there's still fortitude DCs to be overcome, and there's still hit points to be whittled down. So, they do need to make a good party. I can also tell you, Dr. N. Moose as an NPC in my campaign, that's pretty good. Lol, wait, the music you played for Inner Radiance was copyright even though it wasn't? Well, okay, so I pay monthly subscription to Epidemic Sound, which allows me to play anything from Epidemic Sound on these streams or on my channel, and I don't get copyright struck because I pay for it, and so I have a license to use it. Well, I wanted when I did the Inner Radiance torrent, I put on some hard rock music really quick because I thought it would be really funny, and I just picked some really crazy, weird band, and I played it for like 8 seconds, and it wasn't part of Epidemic Sound's actual platform. And so somebody owned that, and their record company came at me and said, hey, that's copywritten, and we want to claim that video. And I said, okay, because I mean, I used it. So anyways, that's how it happened there. Let me see. I'm going to scrolling back up here, see if we can. The Explorer book is a way to randomly generate the initial theme of the game. My favorite result was Corruption of the Empire. Corruption of the Empire corrupts Empire. Correction of the Empire corrupts Empire. That's pretty funny. Yeah, Explorer is a good book. It's got this cool thing called the Oracle, and the Oracle is a great way to generate ideas about your game. Is it in this game, Oracle? I thought it was in this game. Could be wrong. But I mean, they're both pretty cheap. I mean, this is $40 total to get the Explorer and the base game. And yeah, I think it's worth it checking it out. Probably missed this, but how would one tiptoe between accidentally making all other eras more interesting than current versus making something too barren? Michael Flanagan, I think sometimes you just got to go with the flow. You got to, as a group, you got to decide, like, look, you're going to be interested in what you're interested in. And if something doesn't work out, something doesn't work out. What's that quote from Lenin? He says, there are decades where, weeks happen, and then there are weeks where decades happen. History tends to run like that, right? You get these long periods where not a whole lot happens, and then you get these, pivotal 5, 10, 20-year periods of history where you get so much pivotal change. So, well, Alex says, wow, you trust your players to help create the game world? I can't even get them to write a single page of backstory for their own characters. Well, Alex, that might be because they don't have anything invested. They don't have any skin in the game. It's not also trusting my players. I mean, trusting my players with what? Showing up and being engaged and participating and being an active participant in this game. Yeah. I've railed about this on this channel before. I've been called an elitist snob, a stuck-up prick. I've even been called an apartheid dictator. But I think players can be lazy, and I think that needs to stop. I think players have a responsibility to show up and wear it and get the job done. Okay, I get it. The GM wears a heavy burden, but the GM should not be shouldering 80% of the workload. There are one GM and 4 players, okay? The other 4 players should at least collaboratively be picking up 50 or 60% of the workload of the game. And that means even in the creative endeavors. And, they should be making it easier for the GM to run the game, not harder. You're only one person. So I think players need to, a lot of players treat their D&D experience, they treat their GM like your Hulu, like your Netflix, right? Like your Amazon Prime. Like they can just show up, turn you on, and just sit back and be like, okay, entertain me now. I'm here. Let's go. Like it's story time at the children's library. It doesn't work like that. That's not the way that role-playing games were ever designed to work. And to be honest with you, I don't think they can work that way. So, Damien with the super chat. This take is worse than trench warfare. Yes, it's a brutal, unforgiving, stalemate-ish, hell on earth take because I think players need to do more. Okay, and I think that a lot of things that people have seen, and I think a lot of attitudes that players have been created, leads them to believe that the game should be all about them, and it's all about their enjoyment. And and there's a lot of echo chambers out there on in the TTRPG space where you hear these things like, the number one goal of the GM should be to make the game fun. The number one goal of the GM should be to make sure that everybody's having a great time. The number one goal of the GM should be, and you hear these things, and what you don't understand is that it is creating a messaging for players that they're like, oh, this game is all about me. This game is all about what I want. This game is all about me just being essentially entertained. Entertain me, peasant. I am here to be entertained. That is not the way that these games work, and that's not the way that it should work. All right. Caldaria Q says, what do you think is the sweet spot for stats, 3 or 6? I have also seen 8, but I think that's too many. 4 or 5, actually, is what I think the sweet spot is. Not 3, not 6, 4 or 5. I think that's pretty good. I like 4 because you can have like an XY coordinate and you can make it easier that way. But 5 has that sort of like that, it's like the XY coordinate, and then there's this mysterious 5th element that you can add in there. Like maybe a magical element or something. But I think 4 or 5 actually is better. GM Scott says, I think recording but not streaming session 0 would be a great example. Not streaming because I wouldn't want outside influence on character creation. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be influenced by character creation. GM Scott, one of the things that we learned was that, we had a lot of fun with the Rise of the Rune Lords live AP series. We made a lot of money from it too. But ultimately, I think we as a group felt like, as fun as that was, being able to participate and activate with the chat, how do I say this? We don't want that to be the way we make the most money. I understood that, like we had this AP that nobody watched. It was not popular, and we suddenly made it live. We introduced all these like fun gimmicks, and it made the game exciting for us again because suddenly we were making money and we had a bunch of viewers. We were getting, my biggest concern about going live was I was like, nobody likes to watch live VODs. People do watch them, but overall they are much less popular than a pre-written video. Nobody wants to watch something live later. Like most people want to watch the ball game or the football game live. You don't want to watch it recorded later. And my concern was, man, our APs already only get in the hundreds of views. How could we, we're going to do worse than that. But they were actually more popular on the replay as live games than they were before when they were recorded and edited in the studio. And so, it was a lot of fun and have everybody hyped up. But at the same time, we kind of were like, suddenly it was making more money than any element in our channel. And I was kind of like, look, this isn't what I want, right? So we would rather make a lot less money and sort of just more or less play it straight. I think we still want to figure out ways. I like interacting with our chat. We're not Critical Role, right? The chat isn't streaming by at thousands of posts per minute with people, blah, yelling off into the nonsense, right? I think the most we've ever had in one of our chats was 100. That might have been in the live stream after the final episode of Rise of the Rune Lords, and our Rise of the Rune Lords typically would get anywhere from 50 to 60 people. So it's not so much that it's crazy, and I think some interaction is okay, but I don't think influence is what I would be worried about. So, I do. But at this time, we are not making any announcements yet. So I will say this, Storm Phoenix. We are going to be launching our PF2 AP. But we are also going to be launching 1 to 2 other games as well, which will be on a sort of rotating schedule. And one of my goals is to bring in some new role-playing talent into the channel, and also to use the existing talent that we have and sort of use it in different ways. And I want to make sure that I have good players for all these different games. And we're going to have one PF2 game, and we're going to have some other not PF2 games. And I want to make sure that I have the right players and the right talent in the right games. So no one will support us as much without the wheels. I mean, Damien, you have been saying this since the incident. And I don't think so. No, I don't think we're going to get nothing. But, again, we are committed. We are, to be completely transparent with you, we are doing this AP because our patrons want it. So the live stream APs are basically sponsored by the patrons. The survey really highlighted again that for a lot of our patrons, the AP is important or even very important. And, they're not my masters, but, they pay money and they help support this channel, and what they want, what they care about is very important to me. And they have basically said, we want to see you guys playing. And because of that, that is what my sort of mission statement is, and my guiding mission statement is. So, as far as I'm concerned, we already are supported. We're supported through everybody's generous monthly donations through Patreon. If people want to tip additionally on top of that, that is a cherry on top. Let's see. Looking for the big yellows here. Question from Total Entropy. Follow up to Alex's question. How do you move from lazy players to players that do something? Well, I suppose it depends on what makes them lazy, right? Part of it is you have to be willing to, put on your boss pants, right? You're the game master. There's a certain element of social authority that you are required to wield in order to perform this role adequately. You are, well, I would have said you're not paid, although nowadays we live in a world where some GMs are, but you're not paid and you're taking a lot of extra roles and responsibility. I think it's not unreasonable for you to make a certain explicit demands of people. The second thing is you just ask them questions and don't let them weasel out of it. Make sure that they understand what is expected of them and be willing to be firm about it and say, if you want to be a member and participate in this game, I'm going to need you to participate in this game. I understand that there are people who aren't as active, and that doesn't mean role playing. Like, that doesn't mean like going like, hither, king, please, sir, give us the. You don't have to like. That's not what I'm even talking about. But that doesn't necessarily. I get that that's not for everybody. But players should show up and know what's going on, and they should be paying attention, and they should have an awareness of how the game works, and they should have an awareness of what's going on in your current game, and they should be active participant members. And if they aren't doing that, I think the step one is talking to them about it and saying, hey, I noticed that you are frequently not paying attention. You seem distracted and bored, and you're not really participating. Is this game not fun or interesting to you? And if there are some changes that maybe I could make to make it a little bit better for you, but or maybe this isn't the right game for you. And that's it. All right. The number one goal of the players is to make the game fun for themselves and the other players. GM is a player who just has more PCs than others. In fact, I always, I don't even remember where I read it once, but something said the number one goal of every person at the table should be, first primary goal should be to make sure that everybody else is having fun. Looking for opportunities to encourage and empower the other players at the table. And that includes the GM. Human beings, the other human beings at the table. The second goal should be to make sure that you're having fun, right? So, that doesn't mean you should ignore yourself, but I think putting others first is very much in the spirit of role-playing game as a hobby, and is something that I think, could be better taught to people. Hashtag put your players to work. I agree. Remember, if you have a question, capital Q, capital U, capital E, S, T-I-O-N, colon. Yeah, I agree with that. The messaging of it's the DM's job to make sure everybody's happy. It's like, no, it's everyone's job. I agree. And that Azolgathor, that's great. When everybody else, it's kind of like when, when comedians watch comedians, or when, chefs cook for chefs. When everybody's a GM, that is a beautiful session. I didn't know that Robbie Damon left Critical Role. I didn't know that. I haven't been watching. I didn't know that. Is that true? I think he wasn't liked I think that's why they asked him off. No, I'm just kidding. Is that true? Interesting. I was trying to look that up. Okay. No, he's not joining our campaign. Let's see. Caldaria Q says, I don't disagree with you. However, when I've played in some other GM's world, they often either do almost nothing or they do too much without the player's input. I have been guilty of just showing up before. I mean, look, we're not always on 100% of the time, even as game masters, right? But it's certainly the case that the game master, it's harder for them to have a bad night than it is for a player, right? Because if the GM doesn't really show up, the game isn't really going too much. But also, too, I think that, a lot of GMs, to be clear, a lot of GMs are also way too tight-fisted, way too Scrooge McDuck, way too like, this is my story and we're going to tell it my way, and my players are just ruining everything and they're just getting in the way. Those GMs are also very problematic as well. They wouldn't ask players for help anyways. And then as a player, you feel like you are just along for the ride. That is also bad. There are a lot of other mediums out there and ways to express that. Role-playing games are about collaboration, and I think that is they're one of their defining traits. All right. I save $10 for my paycheck for every live stream just to make sure Derek goes on rants. Thank you, Damien. Appreciate it. Well, that is good news considering it is very, 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 very delayed. Kingmaker is really great, though. I think some of the systems that they designed for PF1 were a little wonky, but ultimately they were fun. The town building and the little cutting out things and playing Tetris with the buildings and stuff like that. That was cool. I'm not going to lie. It was cool. It was very gamey, but I thought it was fun, and I thought it was really cool. So, yeah, Josh, I mean, this is where I'm not going to, go too off on it, but this is where a game like Blades in the Dark really, really shines. Because in a game like Blades in the Dark, this game is designed to be a role-playing game. Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder 2, they are not designed to be role-playing games. There is nothing in Pathfinder 2, and there is very little, I would say, in 5th edition. I actually think 5th edition, in Pathfinder 2, you have your background. And even that is just I was an artist, I was a baker, I was a tinker, tailor, soldier, spy. In 5th edition, you have this bond ideal thing. And those are fine. Those are high-level generic concepts. But in Blades in the Dark, on your character sheet, okay, you're going to have specific friends and foes that are it's part of your character creation process. You have to say, hey, GM, here is somebody who's out to get me. GM, here is somebody who I can rely on in a pinch. Let me pull up a Blades in the Dark playbook. And I'll share it, as I often do. Here we go. We got a whisper. All right, here we go. Or maybe there was. I don't know. These are all very old sheets. None of these. All right, let's try something else. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Whoa. This is it's kind of crazy. Okay, there we go. Okay. That took way longer than expected because the internet is really weird. So you can see here in this example here on this character sheet for this lurk. I'm gonna make this a little bigger, so bear with me. When you make this character, as part of making this character sheet, you've got this section here in the middle here about your shady friends. Okay. And, obviously the game, pre-writes these, and you might say, oh, well, that sucks because that's limited. It's like, well, no, it makes it easy, and it makes it, you don't have to overthink it. For every player out there who goes, I can't believe that these things are already pre-written. Well, number one, if you're a player who really wants to make something unique in your own, you're just going to do that anyways. But more importantly, it provides an immediate context for you to, to just say, hey, look, I have a friend, and they have a little arrow. I have a friend, Telda the beggar. And it's like, oh, why is Telda the beggar your friend? What can you do with her? Meanwhile, Rosalind Kellis, a noble in the city, is my enemy. And my, and it works against me. So a game like Blades in the Dark, basically, it's part of the character creation process of doing exactly what you're talking about, Joshua. It forces the players to have to answer these questions before you even get to play. And it makes you have to kind of role play. So some games are better at that than others. Boothby says, I have a player that only pays attention when the initiative is rolled. Blah. Another with a 10-second memory for any kind of plot point. Blah. And one player who can remember plot points. Oh, great. But is awful with game mechanics. Womp, 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 womp. Yeah. Well, Boothby, get in a community game on the Patreon Discord, and I don't know what to tell you. That sucks. I mean, we play, sometimes we play with friends, or, we play with family, and we don't always get to pick everybody that we play with, but, encourage them, try to get them to do better, do more, maybe push them to GM, so at least they could see on the other side. Sometimes all it takes is a turn behind the screen to really, up your player game. Question from Throwaway. You may have spoken to this before. What are your favorite bits from other systems that you would steal, that you would like to steal? Let me come back to this, Throwaway. Let me answer Michael G's. What are your thoughts on the adventure game engine, also known as AGE? I just picked up the Expanse RPG, and it will be my introduction to the system. My experience with the game engine is fairly limited. When the Dragon Age system came out, which I think actually was their first, they made Dragon Age, and then I think Age was a backronym that they made when they turned the Dragon Age system from the Dragon Age games, and they turned it into a more generic RPG system. And I think they just called it Age because it was called Dragon Age already. And so they made up Adventure Game Engine because it fit. Or maybe they planned it all along, in which case they're geniuses. It's like with the 2d6 or whatever, and then you have a stunt die, and the stunt die lets you kind of determine if you did something really cool, or you can power up an ability and something like that. I've only played it in limited demos at Gen Con, so I don't have a ton of experience with it. But my experience playing at Gen Con was that it was pretty fun and definitely more suited to sort of that, less tactical game and more kind of zippy over the top action type game. So that was my thought on it, but I don't have a ton of experience with it. Let's see. Oh shit, we're talking Blades in the Dark. Yes, we are. I've read the rules in Blades in the Dark, and I like what I've read, but I've never had the chance to play it. Yeah. It's an interesting experience. Hot take: every GM should run at least 10 session campaign of Blades in the Dark. There's not a GM alive who would not benefit from running it a bit. That's not a hot take. That is very much correct. So let me get back to Throwaway's question. What are your favorite bits from other systems that you would like to steal? So for me, I really like mechanical elements that track how much a character, that track things like a character's personality, or things that track a character's drives, or things that track a character's goals. I like having mechanics for role playing, and that is the one main thing that D&D and Pathfinder 2 lack. And I love the idea of, mechanics that, I'm trying to think of a great example of one. Well, I mean, to use Blades in the Dark as an example, at the end of a session, you get to mark experience. Well, if you're if you're a hound, a person, who tracks people down, and you're, a master marksman, right? At the end of the session, you earn experience if you address the challenge with tracking or violence. So that is a mechanical incentive, experience points, for playing your character a certain way. You're not just playing your character a certain way. Like, right, what we think of as role-playing is really just optional in a role-playing game. Like, I could play Pathfinder 2 perfectly well without role-playing at all. Does that make sense? Right? Like, I play the game, I move my mini around, I fight the monsters, I solve the mysteries, I go to the town, I make the check, right? Whether I'm role-playing at any point during the course of that game, or not, it doesn't affect anything about me. It doesn't affect my feats, it doesn't affect my bonuses, it doesn't affect my leveling up. In a actual role-playing game, the game is role-playing. In this case, as a hound in Blades in the Dark, if I want to gain more experience, in fact, it's the only way you can gain experience, I need to address challenges with tracking or violence. And so that means that as a hound, I am mechanically incentivized to approach things the way that a hound would. Now, you can use this concept and apply it to a million other things, right? For example, in general, in Blades in the Dark, at the end of a session, and normally I just remember all of these things, but I can't remember them off the top of my head right now. But at the end of a session, you go around and you ask some questions. You ask questions of the players, which are, okay, for your particular playbook, do you or did you, address something with violence or something with tracking? You're like, yes, I'm a hound, I got to mark experience. But imagine if you were playing that group and you also had, a spider in your group, okay? A devious mastermind. Well, a spider gets to mark experience at the end of the session if they address a challenge with calculation or conspiracy. So you could start to see how that might not mesh with what the hound wants, right? Okay, violence and calculation and conspiracy are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think that's a good thing. Not because player conflict is a good thing, but because I think having these mechanical incentives to play your character, to advocate for your character, is a good thing. And I think being rewarded for role-playing your character, note this doesn't say talk in a funny voice, because that is not role-playing. It means playing your character and taking actions inside of this fictional narrative that we are collaboratively building as my character would. That's what's going to earn me experience. And that is going to reward me to roleplay. I mean, as I always say, in the data analytics department, what gets measured gets managed. And in role-playing games, what gets rewarded, gets done. If you reward role-playing your character, and that is like the way that you get rewarded, then that's what people are going to do. Because otherwise they're not playing the game. How do you get rewarded in your typical game? Let's say you're playing a Pathfinder 2 AP, and your GM, like so many others, is using milestone-based experience. How do you get rewarded? You follow the breadcrumbs. You do what you're supposed to do. You go where you're asked. You try to do as you're bidden. One could argue that spending a bunch of time playing as your character might actually be counter-purposeful to the game, because that might slow you down and you won't get to where you need to be and thus not reach the milestone and thus not reach the next level. Now, I know what you're saying, Derek, that's horrible. People shouldn't just be thinking about leveling up. It's a game. You should be thinking about the rewards that the game are trying to say. Yes, it could be fun along the way, but these are games for a reason. They have structures for a reason. And if you want to role play or encourage that kind of behavior, then you need to figure out a game that is going to reward or encourage that kind of behavior. So I really like what I would call throwaway XP triggers or things like that. Blades in the Dark calls them XP triggers. And I think those are really exciting. And I think they're a great way to reward players and mechanize role-playing and push it and increase it and reward players who do it. Question. I like what Joshua said above. Do you have any tips on creating players more engaged, involved in creating backstories? Now, keep in mind, Joshua, or Zolgathor, sorry, I don't like backstories that much. I actually don't find them to be interesting, because I think that the focus should be on what is going on here in the present. I think the focus should be on what are we doing as a group now? And more importantly, talk is cheap and so is writing. I could write anything I want in my backstory, but it doesn't really mean anything, right? Because I'm just writing it down. I'm an author at that point. The stuff that's happening at the table is happening because we made good decisions and the dice were in our favor and we pulled together as a team. I know it's still all just imaginary dice rolling, but that has a lot more weight, a lot more gravitas than just something that someone wrote down in their background. And I hate to say it, but I think backgrounds get overemphasized because people put a lot of effort into them and they build them up. And then in their mind, this is now their character's arc. And because they wrote it down, this is something that needs to happen and should happen. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's better to actually leave things a little bit more ambiguous and a little bit more vague. That being said, one of my favorite ways, let me see if I can find this here, if there's a quick picture of it on the internet. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. There is a system that the Rogue Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. Oh, perfect. We have it. It's really small and horribly. I can't find a good high definition version of it. Let me see it. It's funny that there's only literally like. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, everybody. I'm just trying to do this so we can get this right. Okay. Here is what is called a life path system. And this is from Warhammer 40,000 role-playing game. And what this does is... Okay. What this does is it basically says... Okay, and remember, this is a space sci-fi game. Okay, so give it a little bit of room here, but basically, when you start the game, you start on a home world, right? And this is Warhammer 40,000, right? The far future of darkness. But you could create something similar to this, and I have created something similar like this for my fantasy games. And it says, okay, like what kind of home world were you born on? Were you born on a hive world? Were you born in a death world? Were you noble born, right? And we sort of circle that. And in this game, it sort of gives you it helps define some of your character. In fact, this is how you build your character. Like, right, like if you start in a noble bone, in Pathfinder 2 terms, if you start on a death world, you might start with an ability boost to Constitution. And if you start on a noble bone world, maybe you start with a bonus to Charisma. Okay? And then from that area, you can go to the next level, but you can only go to something that is either directly below you or diagonal. So if you grew up on a death world, you cannot, grow, you can't be a savant, or a child with a creed. No, your options are either scavenger or, scrape gates. But you keep making these choices. But the idea here is basically you have, where were you born? What was your childhood like? What lure of the void, like what brought you into the life of adventure? What was your first defining sort of pivotal moment, your first major hurdle or trial or adventure? What motivates you to adventure? And then what is your class? And what are your goals? What are your, what are you trying to sort of bring about? Even if you don't put any detail into this, if you just circle the ones that apply to your character, that's about as much background as I would want from a character. I don't need to know everything about your upbringing, but what it's cool to know is, yeah, cool, you were born in a death world. That already gives you, it gives everybody at the table enough information to get some sense of what your character is like. And if we need to fill that out later, we can. And if we want to pull something from that later, we can. But for the most part, we just kind of leave it vague and ephemeral, and we use it as we need it. And at the same time, it gives you as a player a lot of maybe, sort of an instinct for how this character might be different from someone that was, say, born on a imperial world. And I think backgrounds should be more generic than specific. So I think I would stay away from detailed backgrounds with prescriptive arcs and super detailed NPCs. I think it's better to just have ideas. Right? Like even in that Blades in the Dark example, it doesn't really get into it. It just says, Talia, a beggar. And then there's an up arrow indicating you have a positive relationship with her, or a down arrow suggesting you have a negative relationship with her. And, we can flush that out, but let's flush that out through play. Let's flush that out through the game. Let's not flush that out beforehand. Beforehand, that's not the time for playing. The time for playing is when we're actually playing the game. So, all right, sorry, getting caught up here. Throwaway says, if anyone hasn't checked out Homebrew World's character generation questions for players, I'd recommend it. Yeah, Homebrew World is really great. It's a great take on Dungeon World, and it's totally free. I think it's still available on his blog. I don't know about other people, but I'm a little intimidated about playing with people I don't know in person. That's totally reasonable. It's hard for me. I've been to so many conventions and so many games. I think I'm pretty much used to it by now. But, there's always that kind of... It could be cringy to play with new players. I'm not going to lie, right? Like, my group that I play with, have been playing with for over 20 years, we have a natural tone, and everybody knows where everybody else's limits are, and when you're playing with people who you don't know if they're going to take something as a good joke. You don't know if they're going to be offended by something. But this is also where things like, I thought I had it around here, the X card and talking and having a good GM who can make sure everybody feels like it's a comfortable, safe place, I think are very important tools and hopefully make it easier to play with people. But it's also a great way to make new friends. So, Bonadon Alloy, I love player defense rolls instead of monster attack rolls. I agree. I like putting dice into the hands of the players, right? I know it's all random, but as a player, I feel more in control of my destiny, of my fate, when the dice are in my hands. And we're not going to do it because we think we owe it to the Pathfinder 2 community. But, if I were to go more heavy on the house rules for this next campaign for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, one of the things I would probably change is I would make the players roll all the dice. I think it's fun. I think it's exciting. As a spellcaster, I think it's cooler if I get to roll my dice to sort of attack their fortitude or to attack their will than it is for me to just sort of like click a button. I don't get, and then I get to sit back and see if it worked. I think it's more fun for me to roll the die and see if my fireball, if I was able to hit them or were they able to dodge out of the way, right? But it's the accuracy and the efficacy of that fireball that's in my hands with this dice roll. Damien has been on me to play Chronicles Darkness. Damien, it's not just about the rules engine, okay? It's also about the genre. It's also about the setting. It's also about the system. Vampires and the supernatural boogies, especially the way that they are portrayed in traditional World of Darkness, is not as much of my jam. So it's not just about the rules engine, but it's probably worth a read just because you keep advocating for it. And Ryder, I think you were talking about me talking about the Blades in the Dark sheet here, but yeah, that's just stupid. I agree that is what they will cry, and that is what they will say. And the first thing the game would tell you, the first thing I would tell you is feel free to create your own. But let's see. Zolgathor question. Derek, have you checked out Lord Bowman's Destiny system yet? The one that blends hero points with a relevant theme. Have you done your homework? No, I have not done my homework. It's on my long list of things to do, but I have not gotten around to it. But I think that sounds like a promising idea, and I think it's a good one if they have somehow tied hero point abilities into a sort of a theme. I think hero point abilities is a cool idea, and I like it. Shout out to my yes, I need to check it out. You know, I don't really think that Jason Bullman has I think it's just through his Patreon, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. If you have more details, Zolgathor, put them in the chat. I'd like to know what's going on there. Shout out to my player who ran a spider entirely from jail using flashbacks and a handful of specific abilities. That's awesome. That is awesome. Actually, is really cool. Alex, so Blades of the Dark experience is calculated similar to how characters gain bonus experience points in AD in second edition. Yeah, very right. Wizards gain XP for casting spells. Rogues gain XP for disarming traps. Fighters get XP for fighting. That's right. Now, granted, in second edition, you got base experience for, doing your adventures, and there are certain things that you get base experience points for being a scoundrelly scoundrel. But that's exactly right. This is something that the game used to encourage. This idea of an individual mandate and a reward for playing your character as such. So yeah, it's very much similar. I agree with that throwaway. I mean, between veteran abilities and all the other stuff, you can basically make any character out of any other character, which is cool. Yeah, Booth B, that's a great way to describe it. PC backstories are kind of overrated. I would like players to give me 4 PC plot hooks. That's more fun, I think. I agree. And I also agree with Steven here. Backstories are like dressing. In small amounts, it complements the games, but too much dressing or backgrounds, it ruins the main dish, right? Background, it's like some salt and pepper on a dish, But I don't want a bowl full of salt or a bowl full of pepper. I want the steak. I want the baked potato, right? First TTRPG I ever played, I provided my team with a 13-page backstory. Kill it. Nowadays, I just have a summary, likes, dislikes, will, always, will, never. Will, always, will, never is a great technique. I do like that. And again, here's the thing though, where I'm playing a game, right? I want to be rewarded for my will, always, and my will, never. The thing that I don't like about D&D, you don't understand it, but this is very important. In D&D or Pathfinder, if I have something that says, will never, or, will always accept a challenge to a duel, or will never let an insult to his, appearance go unanswered. And everyone's like, oh, that's so cool. Right. And so then you're in this awesome moment in the, the king's chamber, and you're negotiating a treaty, or you're trying to, and then, someone makes some the king's royal counselor makes some offhand remark about, how your clothes are very dirty or unstylish. And your character says, okay, I will never let that insult stand. So I'm going to have to stride forward. I'm going to have to challenge this counselor to a duel, or at least, talk some shit to him. You're just doing that. And that's cool. That's awesome. That is fun behavior. And it's very, very narrative focused. But you're hurting yourself, right? People playing like that should be rewarded, not punished. People playing like that, the safest option in these games is to be like, my character likes nothing. They believe in nothing. They have nothing. That's the safest way to play. Their alignment is true neutral, and they basically just do whatever I want them to do, whatever is best for them at the exact current right moment. And understanding that this is a game, and that this game that you are playing, you may be, you don't have to be. There are different ways to play role-playing games. Some people like to play them as more of a simulation. Some people like to play them as more of a tactical miniatures game. But if you are playing it to collaboratively create a story, then why not have a game that rewards you for doing that? And it can reward you in experience or game abilities or bennies or hero points or whatever the game's currency is or whatever. Point is, I'd rather, like, not having those in place, people don't appreciate that, but it's a big deal. And when you do have them in place, right, what gets measured gets managed. If players know that there is this incentive in the game to do these things, then they are going to do them. And that is going to be better for your game. Am I familiar with, oh, Booth, you're asking Boothby. Never mind. I think it's worth a read to shut you up. I mean, that is what I'm basically saying, but I say it with love because Damien understands. You think I'm the only person who says Warhammer 40,000 instead of Warhammer 40K? I'll say Warhammer 40K, but when I'm speaking to a generic audience, I don't necessarily know that everybody knows that. And also, I was always more of a Warhammer fantasy guy until they killed the game and introduced the abomination that is Warhammer Age of Sigmar. It's horrible and terrible, and I haven't played the game since. And dislike 0 out of 10. I also have a problem with what are they called? The new Space Marines that are even bigger. Not the Primarchs, the Primaris Space Marines. That whole line and that whole lore and everything about it is silly and stupid. It's like, I don't like anything about the Primaris storyline in 40K. Is it like D20 versus... Oh, no. For monsters versus... Basically, when a monster attacks you, instead of me rolling a D20 roll versus your AC, I would tell you the Griffin dives out of the sky and claws at you with its claws. Claws with you with its fangs. Rakes at you with its claws. Okay, the attack DC is 25. How did I get to that? I added 11 plus the creature's attack bonus. Okay, so creature's attack bonus is plus 14. Normally I would roll D20 plus 14. Now I roll 11 plus 14, DC 25. And you go, okay, cool. I raise my shield, I dodge out of the way, whatever. And then you make a armor check or a defense check. And instead of having that armor bonus have 10 plus, you just scratch out the 10 and you just roll a D20. And so now instead of having a flat armor of 30, you have an armor check of plus 20 or whatever, plus 10. And then you are rolling that versus my attack DC. It makes you feel more active in the game rather than a passive in the game. So I think it's phenomenal, personally. I'll have to look into that. Sounds right. I love secret roles, and player defense role seems like a great to give more players opportunities to roll. Yeah. I hate secret roles. So we are in opposition there, but I also agree with you. It's better to give players more opportunities to roll. I hate rolling dice. Question. Do I know anything about Cortex Prime? Not that much. I played some of the original Cortex games at Gen Con many years ago. Smallville, Leverage. There was another Cortex Prime. No, not Primetime Adventures. There was another game. And then they made the generic Cortex system. And I know that now, like, Cortex Prime is sort of like a third iteration of it. But I don't know what they've done with the game system. And I really haven't gone back to it. I played it at Gen Con. I played it in a couple demo games and maybe even a few 4-hour sessions. It was fun, but at least back then, it never really grabbed me. Part of it could have been that Leverage and the TV show, which the game was based on, and Smallville, the TV show that the game was based on, weren't exactly like my all-time favorite shows of all time. Oh, they did a Firefly game too, but I never played Firefly, even though I love Firefly. So maybe if I had played Firefly, I would have liked it better. But no, I haven't played too much. I think it's made by Margaret Weis, and a lot of the Margaret Weis games I haven't really liked. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see here. Neo Anomaly. We have to fight now. I'm sorry. No. Listen, Games Workshop finally gave their license to Total War to make a Warhammer game, and Age of Sigmar was out, and now there's been Total War Warhammer 1, 2, and 3, and all of them use the old world, okay? All of them use the Warhammer that existed in 1st through 8th edition, that existed for, 30 plus, 40 plus years. I don't like the rules of Age of Sigmar. I hate the models of Age of Sigmar, and I really hate the lore and fluff of Age of Sigmar. That was them understanding that Warhammer 40K far outsold Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and basically saying, how can we make Warhammer Fantasy Battles 40K? How do we make Warhammer Fantasy K 40K? And they succeeded, much to the game's detriment, in my belief. Ben says, I've started using hero points in PF2 to be spent by players to state something that is true in a scene, borrowed by 7th Sea. It's gone great thus far. Yeah, this is a classic example. Aaron, William Brandis in the chat, and I will refer to this as the players being able to declare a narrative truth. We started doing this back in the day with Mutants and Masterminds, which uses a hero point system similar to Pathfinder 2nd edition, except that you can earn them when your character has complications that come into play. Like if you're playing a Spider-Man type character and there's an attack on the street, and oh no, your girlfriend or your Aunt May just happens to be one of the bystanders that's on the street, you would award them a hero point because you say, hey, here's a complication. It's tough life being a hero, right? It always seems to be some sort of weird thing, right? Superman is weak to kryptonite, which is this rare material which came from his world that exploded, yet somehow they always have it, right? That's a complication. That's the life of being of Superman. And one of the things that you could do with hero points in Mutants and Masterminds is place it down and basically say, as long as it doesn't contradict something which has already been stated to be true, you can change something to be true. So an example might be you're fighting in a factory and you're fighting against sort of a living plant monster, like a swamp thing, something that can, control, create vine whips and create plant life. And you look around and you're like, hey, we're in a factory, and you slide a hero point over and you say, what if there's a big vat of chemicals over there that have, being made, and they just happen to be like, Roundup, weed killer, like plant defoliant. And you're like, yeah, look, we established that we were in a, if we were in a children's library and you slid that hero's point over, I would probably say no. But yeah, we said we were in a factory. We didn't really specify what kind of factory it is. Maybe it is a chemical factory. And yeah, there are some chemicals over there, and they are, basically they're making Roundup here. And you go, great, cool. And then I rush over and I grab one of the tanks and I throw it up into the air, and I use my heat vision to make the tank explode and spread out all over the plant monsters which have animated to attack us. And you're like, oh, okay, that's awesome, right? Like, that's really cool. And so you can do that by, again, giving the players agency, making them be active participants. And Ben, if you're doing that in PF2, good job. That's pretty awesome, and I salute you for that. Big fan of that. So, well, Joshua, I have so many other things going on when I'm the GM. I'm being the master of worlds. Okay, I don't have time for dice. I want the players to know that their successes and their failures were all their own. I don't ever want my player to ever wonder if I just gave it to them. Ever. I love it. I love it that the fate is in their hand. So great. So big fan of that. Somebody save me, but your woman's break right through me. Just say. Okay, that show was awesome when it first started, but then, like most shows, it got bad. Let's see. I made a list of 60 plus effects you can replace a hero points reroll with. You basically get one random one from the list. My players love them and will not go back to not having them. Well, that sounds like chaos and nonsense, but if everybody's loving it, that sounds really great. And I'm not a big fan of Pathfinder 2's core mechanic for hero point rerolls anyway, so anything that you do to change that sounds A-okay to me. Total Warhammer. See, I always call it that too. It's Total War Warhammer. I just call it Total Warhammer. Total Warhammer's Amazing Fight Me. 1 was incredible. 2 was okay, and I haven't gotten 3 yet because I've heard that it's kind of shitty, and they don't have a war. The campaign is kind of shitty, and they don't have like a Mortal Empires yet, and so you can't play like a grand campaign. And that's all I'm really interested in doing is playing like a grand campaign. It is amazing. I do love it. I have played. Let's see. I have done a complete Mortal Empires of orcs, dwarves, high elves, wood elves. Let's see. What else did I do? Empire, Bretonians, and one more. What else did I do? Orcs and goblins. Not Skaven. Not dark elves. I don't remember. Not lizardmen. I don't like lizardmen. But I was really excited to do Ogre Kingdoms with the third one, and I haven't gotten to one to do it yet, so. Age of Sigmar is terrible. Ben, I knew there's a reason you're my favorite. God bless. I heard your girlfriend, Aunt May. That is true. Aunt May could be his girlfriend. I mean, technically... No. Can you marry your aunt? I don't know. Spider-Man could have married his aunt. Let's see. I've kind of changed my mind on secret roles purely by the notion of wait, I have so much shit to do. Jesus. Yeah, no, exactly. I'm like, you know what? Just roll it. We're going with it. There are a very few roles where it would truly be required for me to actually make it secret because I think it would fundamentally help the game if the players were not in the awareness of whether or not they had succeeded or not. But 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, the results are going to be extremely immediate. And anything that's stupid, like lying to your players on a critical failure for recall knowledge, please, if you watch this stream and you never give me a single dollar, if you only watch this one stream, you never even watch a video, so you don't even give me the quarter of a penny that I get anytime somebody watches a video, please, please, I will have considered it well worth the time and effort if you just eliminate and get rid of that stupid rule from Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which is lying to your players on a critical failure on the recall knowledge check. Just get rid of that. I will say this about Michael Rosenbaum. He has a bomb-ass podcast, okay? Michael Rosenbaum's podcast is amazing. You should 100% listen to it. It is awesome. He's a great podcast host. He gets some great guests. He's got like he's had all the CW people on his channel. He's had, what's his name? Tom Weller or whatever on there a bunch of times. Tom Welling a bunch of times. He's had other people on there, people from Smallville, people from other shows, but just other industry insiders. The guy seems to know everybody. He's cool as hell. He's amazing. He is a great podcast host. I listen to it, but I actually really like watching it too, just because I think he interacts with them so well. He's like my podcast host idol. I think he's really, really great. And he's, he doesn't mince words. Like, they get into it. It's not like you're just here to promo something, right? Like, they actually get into some deep stuff, and I think it's really, really cool. So Michael Rosenbaum's podcast, I don't remember what it's called. I should know. I listen to it all the time. I just call it, I think it's called like With You or something. With Me, Inside of You. I knew it. Yeah, it's kind of a weird name, but it's called Inside of You, and it's really cool. He, to my knowledge, he has not had Allison Mack on the show, but he did have Kristen Crook in. And remember, Kristen Crook was sort of involved with Allison Mack at like the very, very beginning of that stuff. I don't believe he had anything. I don't think she's been on the show. So
Jason B tipped $10. Question: will the next AP have NFT, and can you NFT all the blockchains with the AI/ML data lakes?
Now that would be interesting. Could we mint NFTs of our characters and people can buy them? I don't know. Mac hasn't been sentenced yet. I don't think she's in jail yet. Or she just got sentenced. Let's see. Oh, okay, never mind. She reports to prison early to serve 3 years. So she reported right at the end of last year. So she's still in prison. Yeah. She surrendered to the authorities September 13th. So.
Steven tipped $15. I take the pledge to never lie to a player on a crit failure on recall knowledge or use raw hero points.
That's Steven. Well, John. Hey, welcome, Pulse Driver. Steven, that is everything I wanted to hear, buddy. That's it. It's awesome. That's amazing. Incredible. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you do use raw hero points, that's fine. Just be prepared to be disappointed. You know, like, again, you're giving these to players as like a reward. They should feel like a reward. And oftentimes they don't. It's my biggest problem with inspiration in 5th edition is that you can't use it after the fact, right? But like, hope springs eternal. When you're going in to make your attack roll with your barbarian, like, you're not thinking you're gonna miss, and so you don't want to spend your inspiration, right? So, but in 5th edition, you have to technically spend your inspiration before you make the roll, and I hate that rule too. So, like, if you combined inspiration and the PF2 rules, like, at least that would be somewhat better. But like, where you could, like, after the fact roll a d20 and then take the higher of the two, that would at least be something. But I like the idea that if I'm spending a hero point in Pathfinder 2, it is gonna probably help me. And that's one of the reasons why 99% for the AP for Pathfinder 2 for Quest for the Frozen Flame, we are going to be using a modification of the hero point rules. We are going to use essentially the Mutants and Masterminds hero point rules, which is you spend a hero point, you get to re-roll that re-roll that d20. And on that re-roll, if you roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then you get to add 10 to that die roll. So if you re-roll using a hero point and you get a 5 on the re-roll, that is actually a 15. If you re-roll and get a 7, that is actually a 17. And the worst you could do, a 1, would actually be treated as an 11. So the worst you could get on a re-roll is an 11. So that is 99% sure going to be the way the rules. Thank you, Steven, for the tip. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. And Jason B., yeah, I think you're onto something there with the NFTs. I think that is the way of the future. Sad, I say this mockingly, but let's be honest with ourselves. We'd probably make a ton of money if we did something silly and stupid like that. All right, let's keep going here. Oh, good. I've implemented. Yeah. By the way, when I say GM Scott is just smarter than I am. When I say D20, and if you roll between a 1 through 10, add 10. D10 plus 10 shortcuts the whole process and gets you there way, way quicker. So D10 plus 10 is actually better and kind of involves less math. So it's even better. I don't know. 2 is better than 1 in my opinion. 3 is fine. All of your DLC will carry over when Mortal Empires map. Yeah, I'm just gonna wait for Mortal Empires map. I'm really excited to play Ogre Kingdoms. Not so much about the Grand Army of Cathay. And I don't know what else they added. Was it just Ogre Kingdom and Cathay? But I do like Ogre Kingdoms. Throwaway says, I'm loving the collaborative and respectful community here, also dropping fairly inoffensive opinions unnecessarily followed by fight me. Right. The mean stuff, it's like, yeah, that's cool, man. Work for what goes for you. But if it's like Warhammer Age of Sigmar, not a great game, it's like, fight me. Yeah, well, Throwaway, that is what Knights of Last Call are all about. That's what our Patreon is all about. It's what our community is basically founded and based on. And, one of the things that I run a pretty tight ship, and if people are disruptive and disrespectful, they quickly are spoken with or dealt with and removed from our community, even if they are a paying member. And one of the reasons I have people pay to even access our Discord is because I want you to have some skin in the game. I don't want you to just come in and be some internet troll who's going to shit on everybody else. and think you can get away with it. I hate that about the internet nowadays, and I won't tolerate it in my community, and my moderators won't tolerate it in our community either. And we can have these open discussions, and we can voice opinions and play different, and you can be wrong and still be having fun, and I can be wrong and still be having fun. And so I encourage dissent, and I encourage differences of opinions, because that's why I have so many role-playing games behind me, is because a lot of different people had a lot of different ideas about how we can sit around and roll dice and tell stories together. So obviously I'm a big believer in that there is not just one truth to all of this. Let's see. Ruin Smith says, I don't know, man. I like lying to my players. We have work to do, Ruin. Ruin, we may have to create a new tier for the Patreon and have it be like therapy sessions where I ask you what role-playing game hurt you, and we try to create some therapeutical models for you so that you can overcome this horrible enjoyment of lying to your players. Don't lie to your players, Ruin Smith. Give them the information they need to succeed. Give them the information they need to make good decisions. They'll feel rewarded. You'll feel rewarded. Trust me, it'll be better. Let's see. Oh man, a bunch of people actually like Rosenbaum as well. Very cool. Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, I think Paladin's Fury, I think when people do, I know at our tables when we're playing this rules as written, when someone rolls a nat 1, it's always just like, it's a big joke, right? It's played for laughs. Like the GM will be like, you've heard that ogres really like a good Southern style barbecue, and that if you approach them with a solid, stack of ribs and a good smoked brisket, they're gonna just welcome you with open arms and let you hang out. We always just play it for laughs because we understand that fundamentally it is just it's just problematic, right? Have you ever listened to the Hardcore History podcast? I have. Yes, I have. I listened to it. I haven't listened to it in a while, but yeah, I have listened to it, Ben. It's great. It's great. They do a great job. And I like that they kind of really look at it from a very deep dive and sort of understand all of the moving parts. So yes, it's a really good one as well. Now that it's actually going to be summertime again, springtime, hopefully, get outside, get into the parks and stuff like that. As we wind down on COVID and stuff like that. And I always like to just listen to podcasts and stuff when I go for walks and go for hikes and stuff. So, let's see. They had all the chaos stuff, and Kislev. Okay, I don't really care about Kislev, and Chaos is the bad guy. You shouldn't be playing Chaos. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. Lying to the player characters is okay. Lying to the players is never okay. I feel like somebody said that, Damien, and I don't remember who said that, but that's pretty good. Oh, throwaway. It's so painful. They banned divination spells above level 3. Why? That is a godsend. I wish divination spells started at level 1. I'm talking about like good ones, that actually like give players information, because that way it is like it's a free get out of jail card for the GM, so that players can make better decisions and feel rewarded and keep everything moving, whether you're playing a homebrew sandbox style game or an adventure, pre-written adventure. Like, I want my players to have the information that they need to succeed. The fact that they ban them, you are correct to be driven crazy. That would drive me insane. I throw my hands up and praise God when my players get access to like level 2, level 3, level 4, and they start getting divination, augury, locate object, locate person, clairaudience, clairvoyance, divination. These are just fantastic spells that just, they make the game run so much smoother. Love it. Big fan. Flint says he is a therapeutic game master if you need help. Great. That's awesome. This is correct. This is correct. See, if you give them all the information they need and then they make the decision, they made it knowingly and willingly, and then if they all die, well, that's on them. And Damien is correct. I think I missed what he said here, but apparently he said, yeah, but about lying to your players. But I liked Throwaway's take on it, right? If you tell a player this is a lie, but your character believes it, you know, they're going to get, they're going to actually lean into it. And I think that's a lot better. That's pretty good, Rope Mimic. Right. This is Ian Ryder. This is the classic situation here where, you know, players, they will gotchas are never good. Gotchas aren't good. They're not good in books. They're not good in movies. Okay. They're not good. They're really not good. I mean, they're horribly not good in role-playing games. Playing on the supposed stupidity of your players is so bad. You know, the players make this big plan because they're counting on this potion of fly, and they make this cool, elaborate plan, and then when they go to implement the plan in the middle of it, you drink it and you go, ha ha ha, it's actually just a potion of healing. You guys failed to check. You're not winning anything there. You're not. It's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible process. It's a horrible procedure, and you should just never. Yeah, Ian Ryder, correct. That's exactly right. Let's see. That's crazy. I mean, I'll be the first to admit I don't understand the current 5e zeitgeist, because I'm not really actively engaged in the game as much. Obviously, I pay attention to what books come out, and I've even bought a few. I bought Fizban's Treasury, and but I haven't bought them all. I mean, I certainly own all the core books, Xanathar's and Tasha's, but I don't own, like, you know, all the adventures and stuff. But I definitely don't, like, stay up to date on, like, the Reddit builds or the YouTube builds or what people are doing in the game, what's really broken. I know there's some cleric spell, healing well or healing spirit, that everyone like loses their mind over because it lets everybody heal to full or something. But yeah, nerfing sneak attack seems absurd to me. So Boothby asks, question: on the topic of giving information, any thoughts on how to get all that hidden backstory info that is given on NPCs, events, locations, and published AP adventures without being a big lore dump? Great question. No. Well, yes. Divination spells and, you know, augury spells and things like that. But unless you want to just sit there and read history text to your players, no. And also, too, they don't need to know everything about that. You know, because it doesn't actually matter. I think a lot of that information, quite frankly, between you and me, is there to pad the word count and is there to make the adventure more of an enjoyable storybook for the GM who bought the adventure. I think Paizo knows that there's a lot of GMs out there that buy a lot of their adventures. They may even know that there's a lot of players out there who buy their adventures. And they know that most people take many years to play through an adventure path. And that means that if they want to sell these adventures to their GMs, they need a way to keep them entertained and keep them buying. If the modules were written in a very useful, stripped down manner, in a very convenient format that was designed and optimized for play at the table. You know, everything on 2-page spreads, very, very simple, you know, counter design and building, lots of tools and lots of sidebars to give the GM the information that they need to run a given encounter or scene or chapter. That would be incredible as a resource for a GM, but it would be a real bore. It would be a technical manual, and that wouldn't make for an enjoyable read. And so you probably wouldn't buy their adventure pass unless you were very specifically running it. And I think they want GMs to buy them, even if they aren't planning on running them. And I think they want people to be able to sort of read through it like it's a little storybook and be like, oh my gosh, it's just so cool. There's these fun little things and all this information. Wow, it's so cool. But like, it doesn't really come up. And because of the way that these games are designed, it's even hard for people to use, a bad guy more than once, because unless you're going to openly cheat, there's no way that you can guarantee that bad guy's safety. So like typically the first and last time that you meet any villain in one of these games is the time you fight him. And usually it's time to throw down. And, a lot of times the adventure path will even say they attack immediately. And so there certainly isn't time for monologuing. And I think a lot of that information, quite frankly, just isn't important. It doesn't need to be known. I mean, how many movies do you watch where, in theory, the villain or the bad guy or the protagonists have probably very complicated and interesting backstories, but it never really comes up. They're there to be a foil to the character and maybe have a little bit of dimensionality, and then they die, So I think you can get away with using divination and recall knowledge and talking with other NPCs. But for the most part, I do think it would just be a lore dump, and I don't think it's always necessarily to the PC's benefit to know all that stuff. So, let's see. We've got a bunch of stuff here. Gotchas are never good. Honestly, never considered. Subverting expectations isn't good storytelling. Right. I also agree. I did not like Star Wars 8, The Last Jedi, until I saw Star Wars 9, Return of the Skywalker, and that made me like 8 more just because, it's like, how much blacker can it be? It can be no. Oh, well, something happened. Okay, sorry about that. I think we had a hiccup there in the video stream. So hopefully we're back. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Well, YouTube's been having a lot of problems today, so I didn't even think I was going to be able to go live today. So this has been a pleasant. All right, good. We're back. Everybody's back. Great. What was I saying? Oh, right, about subverting expectations. Yeah. Star Wars Episode 8 was horrible, but then Star Wars Episode 9 came out. But Star Wars Episode 8 was bad because it, subverting expectations and gotchas, they can be fun to see to characters that you don't care about. But in RPGs, the characters are your characters, so you care very much about them. So I promise you that it's not a good idea. So that's great. Thanks, Throwaway. That's awesome. I see we have some people talking about 5e. Let's talk about actual role-playing games. If you play 5e and have fun, look, what am I going to do? Shit talk too much on 5e? It's basically Pathfinder 2. It's basically 2nd edition, 3rd edition D&D. It's basically the role-playing game that for the most part I've been playing for the majority of my life, right? Like, yeah, it's a little different, but like 80% or something, or 85% of the DNA is still right there. So like, it's not like it's some huge difference, but it's enough for me to not be as interested in it. But, let's see. Are we still talking about 5e? Goodness gracious, you people. I know Damien is, I think, aren't you a Star Wars apologist, Damien? Don't you love the new trilogy? That's okay if you do, but, so I ran into this issue though. Suppose I have 3 unconscious PCs and 1 PC that ran away from a fight. What should I do here? Bit of a pickle. No, it's not because of bad recall knowledges. It's a great question. I think what the answer should be, what would the creatures that remain do? Would they kill the people? Would they take them prisoner? Would they hold them hostage? Or would they just eat them or, kill them? I think if you play out what's consistent I think there's a certain element of that your players are going to expect that. Now, if you pull that out of nowhere and that's never the way you've played before, then yeah, they're going to be really upset about that, right? Because you're going to say, this isn't the style or the tone of the game that you have ever set up for us. If you were playing like a Saturday morning cartoon style show, and then 3 players get taken out, but one manages to escape through the window, and then it cuts to the commercial break, and there's a bunch of Toys R Us commercials, and then it comes back, and it's like, well, the villain murdered the other 3 characters, slit their throats. That might not be appropriate for the tone, but it's possible that for your game, that tone may also be that type of answer that might be inappropriate, right? So you need to set what is right for the tone of your game. Let's see. I honestly liked Rogue One and Solo better than most Star Wars movies since COT. Rogue One was great. Solo I didn't like, but let's see. The players that were captured tried to break out, but the one that escaped meets up with the Rangers been hunting the creatures that took them prisoner. I mean, again, my thing is, I try not to figure out what's going to happen. In fact, the less I know, the better, right? I don't want to know. Let me give you a great example. It's story time. I told this story yesterday in the Patreon in a separate thread, so I'm gonna kind of go from there. Blades in the Dark, and we played a game during COVID. And when you make a character and when you make a crew of in Blades in the Dark, you pick what kind of criminal organization you want to be. Are you a group of assassins? Are you a cult? And the group that I played with wanted to be hawkers, which are basically people who sell stuff, right? Hawkers, okay? You sell, you deal and trade in. Thank you. Come on, focus. Okay. Now, when you make a crew, you pick an advantage that your crew got. And the group decided that their characters wanted superior weaponry. And the game has this thing. It says when you make that, you gain the superior weaponry, but you pissed some other faction off in the game. So we just randomly picked a faction from the back of the book called the Fog Hounds, who were a small-time group of smugglers who owned a small boat and would smuggle things in and out of the city. And so the group had this extra exquisite weaponry. They had a pissed-off group of smugglers. And so we decided, the group of PCs, probably right before the game started, double-crossed them or did them dirty, stole this shipment from them or didn't pay for it, and they're pissed off and looking for revenge, right? Now, from the very... no plan whatsoever. In this game, the following events occurred. Well, the group, when you make a hawker, when you make a group of hawkers, you get to start off with one hawker ability, okay? And they chose right here, they chose the good stuff, okay? The good stuff is your merchandise is exquisite. The quality is equal to your tier +2. So primo stuff. Well, we decided they were drug dealers and they were selling a very premium product called Joy. And the group found out that because they had pissed off this group of smugglers, that the smugglers were trashing their name and trying to cause problems for them. So the group decided to go and deal with them. So the group went and they basically blew up the boat of this crew of smugglers. Well, the crew of smugglers and their Captain Cobb, didn't take a liking to this. And so Captain Cobb and his former crew, without a ship, now basically swore revenge and went to war with the Bright Side, which was the name of their criminal organization. And going to war is not a great thing. So Captain Cobb and his crew of cronies were going around the streets, beating up their drug dealers and beating up their their people and stealing their stuff. And so the group decided they needed to make an example of this. And so they just they said, hey, we want to kill this Captain Cobb. He's causing too much problems for this. So they set up a mission. They went and they assassinated Captain Cobb. But they did so in a way that his spirit would be free to roam the city. This is something in Blades in the Dark. Ghosts are a problem, okay? The people don't go to the afterlife anymore. Their ghosts linger in the world. So this ghost basically started haunting the party. And was causing a lot of problems for them. And so they said, okay, well, we need to deal with this ghost. They created a trap for it, almost like Ghostbusters. And the spirits can be dissolved with electroplasmic energy, right? Sort of like magic oil lightning, basically lightning, electricity. And they created this trap. They lured the ghost in, they trapped the ghost, and they burnt the ghost's spirit. The electroplasm reduced the ghost to a fine silvery ash. So it was like this magical ghost dust. Well, they decided, hey, maybe we can do something with this ghost dust. And they ended up making a new wonder drug, a really awesome drug that they could sell for a lot of money. But the problem is, you need ghost dust. How do you get more ghost dust? Well, they needed to find a way to get to it. And they ended up infiltrating the largest organization in the city in order to get to it. And to do that, they had to strike an alliance or an allegiance with a powerful group of nobles who could get them on the inside to try to undermine the authority of the group. And then this led to a massive series of double crosses, with the party becoming ever escalating, ultimately resulting in a planar rift ripping open in the middle of the city, ghosts pouring out, and the group eventually, using advantage of a fake church they had created, a cult of worshipers, in order to get them to kill themselves, Jim Jones style, so they could sell their now deceased bodies to the spirits of the ghosts to create a personalized vampire army, which ultimately one of the characters used to seize control of power in the city and use his force of undead vampire enforcers to bully, bribe, extort, and assassinate his way to being the mayor of the city. And that is where the game ended. My point is, none of that was planned. I had no idea when we started this game anything. We played this entire game, and all that stories and a million other ones that I'm not telling you all happen because of a couple of mechanical decisions that had some narrative backing from the game, and the players and me just rolling dice and seeing what happens and figuring out what makes sense to go next. And that's it. And here's the thing. Is it a script that I would sell to Hollywood? No. Is it a story that a ton of people, however many people watch Critical Role, that like 100,000 people are going to want to watch on Twitch? No. But it was our story, and that made it 100 times better than anything that I can buy off the shelf or watch on the screen or anything like that. Like, it's cool. I love that people like watching us play our APs, but no game that I run is ever going to be as good as the game that you run for you, right? Like, get ideas, learn, be inspired, but ultimately the best game is the one that you're running, hands down, right? Hey, thanks, Pulse Driver X. Hey, Rusty GM here from PF1, and my group wanted a new and different campaign from 5e and Delta Green, so I stepped up. Starfinder versus PF2, which would be more accessible for beginner group? Well, I mean, if you're familiar with PF1 and D&D, PF2 is probably got more familiar tropes, but PF2 does have some additional rules. It does have these 3 actions. Starfinder is much more similar to PF1 than Pathfinder 2E is similar to Pathfinder 1E. So if you really want to keep something that's more similar with PF1E, then I would go with Starfinder. But if you want something that's a little bit more up to date and modern, and some of the pros and cons of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, like the 3 actions and the way the actions work, and the way class feats work, and the way that critical hits work, then maybe try Pathfinder 2nd Edition. But if they're more beginners, I mean, both the beginner boxes are pretty good for Starfinder and for PF2E, and but if you really like that PF1 engine and you like the idea of like this sci-fi fantasy, then yeah, Starfinder could be a good choice for you. So, but if you're like super beginner, I mean, if they have some experience, Pathfinder 2nd Edition isn't bad. Like, for a brand new, I've never played a role-playing game before, it's hard for me to recommend Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It is. I hate to say it. I know it. The beginner box is so good. I know, but I think it's a little overwhelming for people. I really do. I think Pathfinder 2nd Edition is it's a 200 level course. It's not a 100 level course. I really do feel that way. I think that's what gives the game more longevity for people who are interested in a higher level of play. But I don't think it's good for beginners. So again, Derek's an elitist snob and he just likes 5th edition. I actually read that in one of the comments, by the way, that someone thought I was like a 5th edition fanboy. I'm running Abomination Vaults for Pathfinder 2nd edition because I want to get familiar with it and also try Positive Ventures. But I also know for a fact that I'm going to be throwing in my own stuff within a couple months. That's great. Pathfinder Abomination Vaults, seal of approval from Derek. I ran it. I ran the first 4 or 5 levels. We didn't finish. I ran it on Foundry. It was my first experience with Foundry. I really thought it was a good old school type adventure. A dungeon, a cool location with cool stuff happening in it, and the players get to go and they get to muck around and they get to kind of decide how they muck around, how much they want to explore, if they want to go down to level 3 or shoot down to level 6 and skip level 4. Like, the players have a lot of agency because it is a dungeon. One of the many reasons that I think dungeons are great. It's not a script like a lot of modern APs are, I'm trying, Damien. I'm trying to stop worshiping 5e. Like, I know it's so good. It's so boy, gosh, let's pretend though. Can you imagine the money that would be flowing into this channel's coffers if we were promoting some 5e Kickstarter or some new 5e channel? My gosh. Be crazy. Question, are there any types or even specific enemies that you just love running or that your players typically love going against? Undead, giants, dragons. Let me think. My favorite monster types are undead, dragons, giants. My secondary favorite monster types are probably like humanoids, constructs, like maybe aberrations, but not quite. It's hard for me to say. My least favorite monster types are definitely fae, plants. Trying to even see what the monster types are. Make sure I get them all here. Let's see here. Yeah, aberration. I'm kind of medium on aberrations. Some I like, some I don't like. Constructs are okay, but they're not the be all end all. Love dragons, obviously. Don't like fae. Humanoids are, again, okay, solid B tier. Oh, magical beasts like griffins and stuff like that. Yeah, I like them. I don't think I like them as much as I like dragons, giants, or undead, but I like them a lot. Oozes. Actually do kind of like oozes. Again, not as much as the top 3, but they're in the upper crust. Devils, demons, outsiders, solidly, I like them a lot. Plants, not a big fan of. Fae, not a big fan of. Not even a big fan of vermin, really, or swarms. Not really a favorite there either. And my players, maybe it's part of the natural Darwinian evolution, but those are also the monsters that my players tend to really like playing against too. So I do love it. So I pay you good money not to do 5e. Somebody had asked a question. Oh yeah, it was Kieran. Based on survey results, are we getting indie RPG introductions and previews? Kieran, I'll probably share this with the patrons specifically, but yeah. Overwhelmingly, the patrons basically said, we want Pathfinder 2 content. We want rules discussions. We want you to talk about classes and monsters and design. We want you to talk about rules and rule systems and homebrew. But that was definitely the A tier. But a very good, solid chunk of people said, we'd like to learn more and see more about some of these other game systems as well. So I would love to start a series where I, again, talk about a game. I talk about what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, the basic mechanics of it. I'm not really the type to go into like how a game is played. Like, how it's played does that really, really well. But I like talking more about what I think the game is good for or good against. So, yeah, good stuff. Let's see here. Okay, sorry, just getting caught up. Sell out, Derek. You don't need a soul. Do it. I think it's supposed to be do it. Undead giants, dragons, or undead giant dragons, because hell yeah, either way. That is true. Yes, the brain in the jar. Okay. So Lance Quagmire is a player of mine who's played with me for many years. And there was a specific type of monster that came out in 3rd edition. Actually 3.5 edition. It came out in the Libris Mortis, Book of the Dead, Book of the Undead, which is very similar to the Book of the Dead, which Pathfinder's about to come out with. And they put a monster in there, which I just thought was so cool. Brain in the jar. It was like this floating brain, psychic powers, undead. There's an undead brain floating in a vat of green, blue goo, and it had all these psychic powers. And I thought the monster was so cool. It's so like, classic 1950s horror. Love it. And years later, 3.5 ended, we played 4th edition. And then 4th edition, we played for a couple years, and we said, we're not like, the game's already starting to wilt because they've already stopped producing things for the game because they were starting to do 5th edition. But Pathfinder 1 came out, we played Pathfinder 1, and eventually we did this 20-level mega dungeon that we played for over 2.5 years, maybe close to 3 years, called Dragonstealth. And the group finally gets down to this level called the Aberrant, I think it was level 6, maybe? Called the Aberrant Laboratory. And this was a weird, this is your classic creepy weird science Dr. Frankenstein level with lots of weird creatures and strange devices and half misformed beings and all this other stuff. And finally, in the center of it, like the mastermind of the level, I put this brain in the jar. And I still remember the visual imagery of the room. It was this really cool room that had all these like whirling machines and bubbling vats of goo, and there were like cables or power lines almost like running through the cabling running along the ground and across the ceiling, kind of like a mix between like a sci-fi ship, but also like what like an alien's nest looks like with the eggs. And in the center was this glowing, green vat of ooze was this brain in the jar. So I had this I thought it was going to be this awesome fight. Well, the rogue in the party, played by Mr. William Brandis, had this armor that was made of like pure darkness. And it gave him the ability to like absorb shadows into himself, and he could turn invisible, and it gave him a bonus to stealth. But I had forgotten that like once a week or something, he could also absorb magic into it. And essentially he could just create an anti-magic aura. So they enter the room, and I get really excited, and all this magical stuff starts happening, and the magical insinuations, the psychic insinuations start assaulting him, and then he just like activates his armor, and this magical aura surrounds him, and the brain in the jar can't do anything to him because all of its attacks are magical. And he just walks across the room, and then he gets up to like the jar, and it's like as he gets close to the jar, that anti-magic aura surrounds the brain, and basically now the brain is helpless. It can't do anything. It like just starts like bobbing up in the tank, and he like gunk, 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 knocks on the glass, like hi, like waves at it, and whatever the creature was thinking we'll never know because the anti-magic aura. And basically they just like shatter the glass, and then like the thing falls out onto the floor, and they just like stab it and just kill it completely unceremoniously. And that was like my favorite monster, brutally prison shanked by my group of players. So what a story. Thanks, Lance Quagmire. Half of our group quit PF2 because it was too hard. The PF2 portion of the group now plays 5e with them every other week. We trounced all the 5e encounters because we trained on Pathfinder 2. I think Pathfinder 2 is harder than 5th edition. And I'm not going to say that makes it better. It's a different experience. If you enjoy that, you'll enjoy Pathfinder 2 over 5e. I like Pathfinder 2 over 5e. Full stop. That being said, this zeitgeist that is in the community recently of like, once 5e players play Pathfinder 2nd edition, they'll never want to go back. That is such a flawed logical line of reasoning. No, they won't. No, they won't. Trust me. There are going to be some people who are dissatisfied with 5e, and they're not going to be willing to move to a different game like this. They want something a little bit more crunchy, a little bit more gamey. Those are the people that are going to go to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and they may have found their way there anyways. And this idea that anyone, once they get a taste of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, is going to jump ship immediately is a very flawed line of reasoning. Yes, Zogathor, there were a lot of phase and constructs in the Battlesuit Bestiary. Constructs I'm okay with to a certain extent. Not so much Fae. Yeah. Wow, I knew that. I mean, I knew it was going to do extremely well, but I didn't expect it to do that well. And Karen, we talked about this earlier today on the Discord. And again, if you want to be part of those conversations, check the link below. Patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. We've got several different levels. $3 will get you into the Discord and into the conversations. But our $5 and higher tiers also get you access to all of our exclusive content. It gets you access to our community game, our Northern Reaches mega game, where we are running 12 or 15 GMs, 40 plus players who are all part of a big collaborative PF2 game where it's like an MMO plus a homebrew game plus organized play. So it's like world of Pathfinder craft. But instead of just like living in a world where everybody can just go do the same raid over and over again, these are real human beings that are running these games and overseeing them. And so, if you go kill a monster or the boss, it's dead, and the world changes and the group changes, and you can make things that affect the entire history of the world. You could do something that might give every player in the game a massive bonus because of something you did and your group did in a dungeon. You level up, and we play through a series of seasons, and you try to earn achievements and accomplish mighty things and, become a legend in your own time. So all those things and more are available as part of our Patreon. And if you just want to kind of dip your toe in and check out the Discord, we have a $3 Squire level. But if you're interested in participating fully, we have a $5, $10, and $25 level for ever increasing rewards that'll kind of get you a lot of the benefits. But yeah, this is what I was talking about. And again, people acted like I was being a dick, but it's like, that's real money, right? That's life-changing money. Like, however many years ago, if I was like, oh, Kickstarter seems cool, I want to create my own RPG book, and maybe it would cost me, I don't know, maybe it'll cost me $15,000 to publish. And if I could do the Kickstarter, and maybe if we can make 20 or 30, like 20 grand, 25 grand, 30 grand, that would be amazing, but it's like, then that's $15,000 in my pocket, right? That's not, I know that for a lot of people, that is very significant money, but for most folks, that's not life-changing money. That's not a full-time career. That's not something that you are going to go full-time with. But when you start talking about $1 million Kickstarter in just, the opening salvo, how do you resist that? That's just way too much clout. And if you're an independent designer, you go, boy, I could go make my fantasy heartbreak. I could, the next, John Harper could be out there about to make the next Blades in the Dark, but it's even better. Some really crazy off the wall system that really helps us tell really incredible, unique stories. And again, this isn't 5E's fault, but if you're like, I could go and take a huge gamble and make this game and maybe sell, 1,500 copies and maybe net a profit of a few $1,000s. Or I could go make a 5E monster book. And yeah, I'm not Matt Colville, so I don't make $1 million, but maybe I make 100,000. Maybe I make 150,000 and I only had 10,000 into the book or 15,000 into the book. And that's more money than I've made ever in my life. So, right. Like that's the problem that we're creating. It's not 5E's fault. It's an ecosystem where it is so successful that it is, it's not a rising tide that's, lifting all ship. It's a freaking aircraft carrier. and all the other tiny boats are just getting, sunk, submerged, and swamped in its wake. So that is my concern. Let's see. That's good. Question: will you review the next Battlesuit Bestiary that will come out? Will you review my monster? Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they'll send us stuff. The Roll for Combat people seem to like us. We actually have to review the Dragon's Ancestry book still, so we have that on our list as well. But yeah, we will review the monsters, Zolgathor. Can't promise that I'll be nice. Well, I'm always nice. I can't promise you that I won't critique it. I'm never mean. I'm never trying to hurt anyone's feelings. But if I think a monster is badly designed or stupid, I will say that it is. Let's see. Have you played Modifius Star Trek Adventures? If so, what do you think? Silverwolf. I have. In fact, unfortunately, I missed my game last night, but I have been playing. A patron, a member of the chat, Damien, has been running a Star Trek Adventures game on our Patreon. I like the 2D20 engine a lot. I actually liked it so much, I went out and bought the book, and I also picked up the 2D20 Dune game as well. And Aaron just loaned me his Conan book that he bought, the 2D20. So I'm interested in the 2D20 system. I think it has a lot of promise. I like the momentum threat pool system. I like the way that focuses work. I really like, kind of reminds me of Legend of the Five Rings. I like that you combine, stat A with stat B to determine your sort of TN number. I like that. I like adding two things. I am doing this skill, but I am doing it this way. And I like that you can change that depending on the nature of the game. So I think it's really great. So I do like it. That is the answer, I would say. Golden Monkey, the mega game sounds pretty cool. Do you have time slots for the East Pacific crowd? We have a number of people in sort of Asia Pacific, particularly Australia, New Zealand. We're kind of growing that number. But one of the things that we've tried to do is encourage the GMs to run games at time slots that may work better for people who are in Europe or who are in sort of East Pacific. So, it is tougher to do. We will typically award the GMs extra GM brownie points for trying to run games that can meet with people's demands and schedules. But most people are pretty well and accommodating. And if you're one of those people who is like plus 12 or plus 13 hours ahead, you might have to play, on a Sunday morning while everybody else plays on a Saturday night. But if you're willing to make some adjustments to your schedule, most of the GMs are usually pretty good at trying to work something out, I would say. Let's see. Sell out early and then use the money to do whatever you like. Yeah, I know. But I think you discount people's genuine drive to make non-D&D products. The next John Harper makes the game because they want to make it, not because of price tag. I hope you're right, Dan. And I think, though, it's one of those things where it's like, it used to be easy. I hate to say this, but like, even if you made a game for D&D back in the day, yeah, you were going to make more money, but it still wasn't that much money, right? Like, you were going to make less making your passion project, for sure. But making the game and selling out to D&D wasn't really going to net you that much more money anyways. It wasn't going to be life-changing money. But you were talking about 8 million plus players playing D&D and a precipitous drop-off to anything else. And that number, that 8 million number, is only going to continue to grow. 16 million, 20 million. 25 million active players. And at that point, having passion's great, but at a certain point, your integrity gets tested by the fact that you're like, I got to provide for my family. I got to provide for myself. I have a retirement I want to save for. I have a house that I want to buy. I have a, car, a kid I would like to send to college. And you go, if I make this for 5e, all of those things could happen. And so at a certain point, right, like the temptation becomes ever greater. And, I certainly respect people who do it for that reason. But when that money is just there, and the 5e community has demonstrated that they are willing to spend their money on the products, seemingly any product that people will put out there, it's hard, when people want to give you their money, it's hard to say no. Hey, Sir Alex, great. Tome of Adventure Design is amazing. I own the book and I kickstarted it just to show my support for Matt Finch and the people over there at Mythmere. And that's great. I think it's a great, fantastic book. Really fun for helping you sort of come up with creative, cool ideas, when you're trying to brainstorm future ideas for new ideas for your game campaign or next adventure. You could maybe even get away with it using it if the party goes off script in the middle of an adventure. But I think it's definitely more of a preparation tool than sort of a mid-game, chaos generator. But I think it is a great book, and I think some of the ways that it approaches the game, randomization are really, really fun, and that's really awesome. Really excited. Yeah, I mean, the 5e Critical Role debate, can go to the end of time, but, I do think that what we define as TTRPGs is changing, and what the audience defines and wants out of a TTRPG is changing. I say for better or for worse, depends on what your perspective is and what you want out of role-playing games, right? Yeah, KC, there you go. Very easy to glorify the starving artist, but a lot harder when it's you. And, now some people can really make a living off of these games because the audience for the first time is really there, and they're spending a lot of money. New games will be made, sure, but will people find them when all they care to know about is 5e? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Ben, I think you're exactly right. I think the noise to signal ratio is an all-time high. Yeah, I mean, before, these games that came out were, not really up against a huge bank of competition. But now there's just so much product out there, so many Kickstarters coming out there every single day. It becomes harder and harder and harder. And again, even if 5e was my favorite system of all time, I would still be concerned, because I would be like, I do like these other games. And, the fact that you can make so much money now doing 5e content, it's that much harder for a small press publisher to make it and to make that decision, that tough decision to say, I'm not going to make this 5e. I'm going to go in a completely different route. Yikes. You could be throwing away tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Full stop. Well, that's really funny, Damien, because years ago, Tim and I played Magical Girl high school drama RPG at Gen Con, but it was a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I don't know if it's even remotely connected. It wasn't like a published game. It was like in the beta test phase. But yeah, nothing about Magical Girl high school drama RPGs to me is strengthened or improved by the 5th edition game, except for the fact that it'll sell way more copies than if it was anything else. That's the world we live in. So I don't know what to tell you. It's I hope, again, I'm a pessimist, Not an asshole. I'm just a pessimist. I'm a cynic, and I don't necessarily have the rosy red future that everybody else believes in. So, you know, I was around for the D20 system and the OGL in the early 2000s when every single game that came out had to be D20 because otherwise it wouldn't sell. And you know, I don't know what to tell you. K-Swiss Deck. I don't know. I don't remember what. I didn't really follow up on the game's result, but you know, how do I make 5e for heist, political intrigue, dark fantasy? Don't just play a system made for that one thing. They're awesome often. Yeah, this is like a very loaded issue, right? This whole like, don't hack it. You know, play a system they're made for. It's hard for me to put myself into that context because I've always been interested in role-playing games. It's not that I was interested in Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition or Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. I was never interested in, that's like saying like, oh, you like TV shows? And you go, no, I just like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. You know, I only watch movies or shows if they have the actors who are from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or if it's It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia spin-off series. I don't like television, right? Like when someone says that they are a movie fan, that typically means that they like movies. So I've never been the type of person to say that I am a blank fan. I say I like role-playing games. And so for me, it is very natural for me to look at, again, I was talking about that campaign I was showing in for Microscope that we built in the Trello board. And I said, we didn't even know what system we were going to use to play that campaign world in when we started it, because we said, we'll let the game sort of system be the last choice that we make. That way it'll fit with the game, the world, I should say, the fictional world that we've built. What game system will do the best job of expressing that game world? And so, yeah, it's just, you know, I understand that for some people, they don't want to play other games. I accept their reality. I don't personally understand it. So, throwaway. I don't know if that's 100% true. Yeah. I don't know. I doubt it. I think you're gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater a lot of times. Yeah, GM Scott. I stopped watching TV pretty much in the 2000s as well, but not the 90s, but the 2000s. Yeah, there's an investment, and for a lot of people, the investment is very surface deep, right? They just want to show up and play the game and barely learn the rules, and they just want to, you know, for them, D&D is a lot like watching Hulu or Netflix or going to the movies or watching a TV show, or playing a very light board game with their friends, right? Like, it's not something they're passionate about. It's something that they're just like, this is entertaining for me, and I get to sit around and be social, and it's a very, you know, hobbyist thing, right? Like, for many, many decades, D&D was a very niche hobby, predominantly dominated by cis white men who, for the most part, right, like, even the game itself, I think, played up on these tropes and was like, you know, like the original first edition D&G, like almost purposely used Baroque and obscure language and obtuse language because they wanted to like cultivate this sort of mystique of like, if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you're better than everyone else. You're smarter than everyone else. You know, the average D&D player, his reading level is, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 grades above what a non D&D, like they kind of cultivated this idea that role-playing games were this dark mystery product for a secret in the know cult of people, and that everybody else was not welcome or wanted. And they kind of purposely designed the game to almost be not inviting. And I still think 5e, by the way, is designed not to be inviting. It's not like it's really open. It doesn't do a good job of it. But for whatever reason, the barriers of entry have lowered enough that you are now getting in, right? The sort of more standard middle of the Gaussian distribution of people that you would never think, It's just like video games, right? Video games in the 80s and even into the 90s were sort of the geeky, dorky thing that nerds did, and you played your Sega and you played your Xbox, or not even Xbox, your Sega, your Super Nintendo, or your Atari. And then I remember, like, when I was in college in the early 2000s, this is the first time that, like, you'd go to a frat house and there'd be a bunch of jocks or whatever, or frat guys, and they're all playing Xbox and they're all talking about Halo and, or Madden, and, like, the video games became the sort of default experience for a lot of people. And it was no longer this sort of niche thing that only targeted these sort of closeted nerds who liked video games. Now it was everybody plays video games, and the games became designed to appeal to a much broader and wider audience. And in some cases, you could argue that worked out for the best, and in some cases, you could argue that it didn't work out for the best. Well, D&D role-playing games are kind of going through the same thing, right? For the first time ever, I don't know that this is happening, but I'm willing to bet it happened somewhere. There might be out there, a group of frat boys who now, instead, Friday night before they would, just get wasted and play beer pong, and now they're playing D&D in the frat house. And they weren't before. And, before you might have had a group of soccer moms getting together, and before they would just, talk about their lives, and maybe they would, watch a movie together, or maybe they would, do some hobby together. Now they're sitting around and they're playing D&D. That didn't happen 20 years ago, but that might be happening today. And, there are D&D clubs at schools, and they're not like hidden things out of the way. We played D&D when I was in junior high school, and we would hide in the library back in the corner. We would play after school, because not like we were afraid we were going to get beat up, but like it was just not a cool thing. But now it's like kind of a cool thing to play D&D. That's very different from the world that a lot of us grew up in, and that the times are changing, and you either change with it, or you get left on the side of the road. Let's see. Shark Boss says psychologists are using RPGs as a form of therapy. Sure, why not? I think there's a lot of value in RPGs as a form of self-expression and growth, and all that stuff. But yeah, them times, they are changing. All right, well, we're closing in on 10 o'clock here, so I'm going to start wrapping it up. So if you have any final questions, put them in the chat, because I'm going to get going. Question, here we go. Oh yeah, Zolgathor, we're filming another episode this week, and we're going to continue on, for sure. So the answer is yes. So how do you encourage other people to play other systems? I just told my players I was tired of 5e and wanted to try a new game, and thankfully that worked out, but they are mostly the popcorn viewing type. Yeah, Golden Monkey, you got to, for starters, you should be willing to play it. If you want to introduce the group, unfortunately, you got to be willing to GM it, so that's fine. But also figure out what their interests are, and, try, maybe it's a game system that you're passionate about, but if your players aren't passionate about it, that might not be the best win. But find something that you're all interested in, just to try something different. And also, don't sell it as like a 2-year long commitment. Say, hey guys, I'd like to play a system, and I strongly discourage one-shots. I think if you can play a game system for at least 3 times, okay, for all the work and effort that a GM puts into a game, I think any reasonable person who calls himself your friend or your acquaintance should be willing to give you at least 3 sessions. But play a game for 3 sessions. Let them chew on it. Let them level up. Let them experience some of the strengths and weaknesses of the system, and then make a decision. And make sure that there's opportunities for them. Like, if you're only going to play a system for 3 times, people aren't going to go out and buy, unless they are independently wealthy and are really super crazy and passionate about the game. They're not going to go out and buy all the books. So, if it's a game system that you can have access to a PDF, or if you have access to free rules, if you can avoid piracy, obviously, but or if there's quick start sheets or something that you can share with them that they can at least get familiar with the game, because a lot of times players will go, oh, he's running a one shot. Well, I'm not going to invest any time into preparing for that. They show up. They don't know anything that's going on. They don't know shit about the rules. They don't know shit about the game. You spend 90% of the session just trying to teach them the game. And of course the game session sucks because you spent the whole time basically looking things up in books and not knowing what's going on. That is a recipe for failure, right? You have to have players, again, who are willing to put in some work. RPGs are an active hobby. You get out of them what you put into them. And I think if you want that to be successful, you need to have people who are willing to do a little bit of legwork beforehand in order for the game session to be as successful as you want it to be. Yeah. Fate SRD is free. That is correct. Yes, some games do work great for one shots. Dread is a game that I would never, you almost can't play it as anything but a one shot. It is designed for one shot. But again, it is something that overall I discourage, especially if it's something that you want to actually create and build into a system and say, I want to trade out my 5e weekly game for my new, Blaze in the Dark game. Well, then you want to make sure that the players get to experience the full width of and breadth of the game system. So that's definitely how I would do that. All right, so to sum up, as we end the night, I think other game systems are awesome, and I definitely think that people should explore them. And based on the results that we've gotten from our Patreon, I think a lot of people feel the same. And so I'm hoping that we can either do some live streams or some actual plays, or some additional information about these games, and use them to show people what it is that I like about these games and how you could probably use it in your home game. And so that is on the horizon, and stay tuned because Quest for the Frozen Flame is coming, and we're really excited about getting to start playing Pathfinder 2 again for all of you, and try something new, try something different. That's what's cool about role-playing games. And Ben, good night. Thank you so much, Ben, for the tip. Appreciate it. Everybody who tipped tonight, I want to say thank you so much. And thank you for supporting us. Anonymous, whoever you were, big hats off to you. Thank you very much for that wonderful support. That is incredible. And again, we'll be back Thursday. We are going to continue our All Spells Reviewed stream. We didn't get through as much as I wanted to last time because we were previewing Book of the Dead, but it's going to be a big one. We're going to get to slow. So that's a big moment. And then we'll probably do another set of these streams next week. And then we're probably going to be changing up the schedule a little bit because you know what? We got an AP to run. Damien coming in with a last minute super chat. All right, says look at Werewolf the Forsaken 2nd edition. I have Werewolf the Apocalypse 1st edition, but Werewolf the Forsaken 2nd edition. It certainly confounds expectations, making the werewolves protectors of the natural world against spirits and maintain the balance. To be clear, werewolves in Werewolf the Apocalypse in 1st edition were also defenders of Gaia against the worm, as they called the evil spirits that corrupted things. They could enter the umbral space between realms, and the werewolves were super sort of spiritual, almost shamanistic-esque in sort of a native First Nations people. So that doesn't actually sound that different. But all right, everybody, I want to say thank you so much for joining, and thank you, Damien, for that last super chat. We'll see you guys next time on Knights of Last Call.